All right.
All right, that is what I see as well.
And we're here.
If you are ready to call the meeting to order, I will take roll call.
Okay, so I call the meeting to order. Director Proud, please take the roll call.
Sure, and again, I'll take you as I see you on the screens. Commissioner Callahan,
Present.
Commissioner Kilroy,
Here.
Commissioner Walters,
Here.
Commissioner Bauer,
Here.
Commissioner Carlson,
Here.
Commissioner Cruzan,
Here.
and Chair Light.
Present. Okay, thank you. So with that, salute to the flag. Leslie, would you mind leading us in the salute to the flag?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
and justice for all.
Good job. That always cracks me up. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
Motion to
So
approve.
moved.
I second.
Okay, is anybody opposed? Okay, so we approved the order of agenda. Blue folder items. I did not see anything in the blue folder. Has anything shown up since I looked?
There are no blue folder items for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to consent calendar. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent calendar?
I do. There's one correction in the minutes.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. Let's so the only remaining thing is the approval of affidavit. Let's see, can I have a motion to approve the approval of affidavit?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, let's see, anybody opposed? Okay, thanks. Okay, Vicki, what change are you looking for in the
On
minute?
page 11 of the packet or page 4 of the minutes at the very top, it has both Callahan doing the comment and the agreement. I'm not sure which one it was, whether it was Carlson or Callahan who did it, but I can't both make the comment and agree. Says Commissioner Callahan agreed with Commissioner Callahan.
Let's see. Strangely enough, I saw that when I reviewed the minutes, and I'm somewhat surprised that it was still there. I thought I corrected it.
I don't know, I agree with myself all the time.
Oh, I do, but not usually in public.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we we can go back and look at the video.
Okay.
Go back and look at the video for that particular comment. We'll make the correction and bring the minutes back to you.
Perfect.
Does that sound good? I
That
did
sounds
see
good.
that originally, and that may have been my intent, and I didn't get around to doing the video.
Okay.
So we'll correct that, and we'll bring that back to you. So page 4 of the minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry to be picky, but it should be correct.
That should be correct. I agree.
Picky Vicky.
Vicky.
Do any other members have any corrections for the minutes?
Okay, since that's coming back, I don't think we need to take a vote
No.
on it.
No.
Okay.
So moving on to item H, public participation on non-agenda items. Any emails received from the public?
We have not received any emails. Let me check my screen to make sure we haven't received any e-comments either. Refresh my screen here. And we have not received any electronic comments, and we do not have any members of the public attending our meeting at the moment. So I would say the answer to that is we don't have any.
Okay. Looks like there's no items continued from previous agendas. So now moving on to the items for discussion prior to action. Item J1, receive and file the letter from the Harbor Commission to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding dredging. And the discussion and possible action on a letter to the Redondo Beach City Council regarding the dredging.
Yeah, Chair Light, members of the commission. So we did have a little discussion as to whether this was an item that was a continuation from a previous agenda, but I don't believe the commission ever took a vote to continue it to another agenda. So we went ahead and listed this as a discussion item for tonight. This is something that you had mentioned to us at our last meeting, some housekeeping that we needed to take care of regarding 2 letters related to dredging in the harbor. You might recall on October 27th, you had a special meeting to talk about the proposed maintenance dredging in the harbor. You had a very long and detailed discussion about that. And after that discussion, the commission decided to form a subcommittee to send 2 separate letters. The first was a comment letter to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding your concerns related to some of the specific technical elements of the project, and that's attached to your packet as Exhibit A. And the second letter was to the Redondo Beach City Council outlining some requests and recommendation that you would like to see incorporated into the dredging project. What we're recommending you do tonight, since the letter to the Army Corps of Engineers was already sent, that was sent on the 29th of October, is that you receive and file that letter. And then as to the letter to the Redondo Beach City Council regarding the dredging, to review that letter. If you have any discussion or comments that you'd like to see incorporated into the letter, we can certainly take those down. We could bring that back. If you're comfortable with the letter as drafted, you could take action to go ahead and direct that we send that on to the Redondo Beach City Council. So that would be your second action.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do, just to keep this in order, keep it orderly, can we first discuss the letter that was already sent?
Yeah.
Is there any, well, I'll entertain a motion. Vicky, you have your hand up. Is that on the first item or the second?
Yes, first item.
Okay.
The one that's already been sent.
Okay.
I can't tell you how impressed I was with the letter. Our subcommittees that do letters are doing such a splendid, stellar job. I just can't tell you how impressed I was. I just want to give you guys kudos. So that's all I had to say. I just was blown away.
Well, thanks, Vicky. I think Roger did it. Roger led that one. He did a great job. It was
You guys
easy to follow.
It was
his
just fabulous.
It's me, Jim, and Matt. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, it looks like Matt.
I just wanted to basically say, yes, it was Roger's penmanship, handiwork, etc. Despite his trying to spread the blame, I mean, credit to the rest of us. It really was Roger who penned most of that. So thank you, Roger.
Excellent job.
So I don't see any other hands up. Can I get a motion to receive and file?
So
Motion.
moved.
Oh, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anybody opposed? Okay. Moving on to the second part, and that's the possible action on the letter to the city council. Any comments or corrections or changes people would like to see? Questions? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Would someone like to make a motion that we forward this to the city council with the blessing of the Harbor Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments before we vote? I don't see any hands. Okay, anybody, any dissenting votes on the motion at hand? Okay. So Stephen, I guess you'll take the action to forward that to the council.
We will.
Correct.
We'll make sure we get that forwarded to them. And then when I get the director's report, I'll just, and maybe I'll just kind of quickly note right now that we have submitted our comments. I mean, we've submitted the response to comments, and I'll elaborate a little bit on that in the director's report. So then that, I think you've taken both of the actions you need to take on that item. So you are moving on to item J2.
Oh, I forgot. Do we have to take any
Public comment, probably.
public comments? Yeah.
Yeah, we should do that. We should at least note that we tried. We don't have any attendees. Let me just double check that we don't have any electronic comments. When I checked earlier, we didn't, but let me just double check. We didn't have any electronic comments, email, or anyone attending our meeting to speak on that. So I think you're good on the public comments. So.
Okay, we're blazing right through this agenda. Let's see, going on to item J2, the discussion and possible action regarding the proposals to prepare public amenities master plan for King Harbor.
So what's going on here? Why can't I get to? There we go. Okay. Chair, members of the commission. So what I'd like to do is hopefully do a better job than I did last time of sharing my screen. See, or I won't do a better job of sharing my screen. Oh, here we go. Sure thing. Sorry, my bad. Okay. What I'd like to do is, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to do is just take you through a short presentation. This largely represents the presentation that I gave to the city council on January 12th. I know that the chair was in attendance at that meeting, as was the vice chair, and they had an opportunity to, I believe, hear all of the discussion that was had at the city council meeting. So I'm sure they'll be more than willing to share their thoughts and what they heard and perhaps help chart a path forward based on some of that feedback that we received. As you may recall, this item is really before you as a result of a referral that was made to staff to start the process of preparing a public amenities plan for King Harbor. And this is something that you all, as part of your regular comments on the strategic plan, have been providing input on and requesting that the city council undertake this action, certainly for the last 2 letters and maybe even the last 3 letters that the Harbor Commission has sent to the city council. So I think this is although it never really appeared on the strategic plan as its own defined item, Councilmember Nierenheim picked up on that and sent it to us as a referral. And then that was what started this process rolling and us making the presentation to the council a few weeks ago. As you all know, the revitalization of the waterfront has really been a policy objective from the cities, going all the way back to a couple of documents that were prepared. One is the waterfront asset plan, and the other one is the Harbor Enterprise business plan. And in each of those documents and in the efforts that have been going on in the intervening years, there's always been an acknowledgement that the city needs to upgrade and or replace several of our public amenities that are down in the harbor. And you know, we concur with you that a public amenities master plan can help start to serve as a framework within some of these other revitalizations can occur, and including the attraction of some public and private capital into the waterfront itself. As you know, our past efforts have largely focused on individual projects. So we've taken on, initial planning to look at the boat ramp. We started work on the sport fishing pier. There was an effort that was done related to Moonstone Park. There was a separate effort related to Seaside Lagoon. But none of those ever really were stitched together in a comprehensive way that considers the interrelationship of those improvements and the placement of those amenities within the harbor. So we think that that's an important component in terms of thinking about this now holistically, instead of thinking about it as just individual pieces or individual improvements that need to be made. When we had the conversation with City Council, we recommended that the focus area really be between Portofino Way on the north and the International Boardwalk to the south, right around where Quality Seafood is. So kind of that south end of the International Boardwalk, that be the initial focus. I will tell you that there was some feedback on that we can get to in just a minute, whether that's the place we want to start or whether that should be the main focus area. But regardless, what our effort is to try to do is to identify which amenities should be rebuilt or renovated. Again, where should they be located? What kinds of recreational and operational elements should be included in their design? We started to do some of this for those of you who've been on the commission now with the sport fishing pier conversation in terms of thinking about the recreational and operational elements that need to be included. in that design process. And we think that's going to be an important part of any plan that ultimately gets developed for these various amenities. I won't read this long laundry list, but this is really probably the focus of what we're looking for your input on and what the city council is looking for your input on, which is what should really be included in the plan. And, we've talked about the boat launch facility, the sport fishing pier, and Seaside Lagoon. And I will tell you, Councilmember Nierenheim made a very strong plea that kind of come out of the gate as the beginning portions of this planning effort, call them the big three, if you will, that we really focus on those as an initial phase of the plan, and then move on to some of the other elements, perhaps as the plan evolves, but that we start really looking at those three as the first three. But it could go on to include, a waterfront promenade where we look at how the pedestrians move through the area. We've talked about it before that we need to think about the flooding along the International Boardwalk that occurs during high tides and how we might address that. We have a continuing need to replace the basement 3 docks. I will tell you, I was on a property management call with Leonardo Property Management the other day, and during the last storm, we had a couple of the dock fingers got sheared off as part of that storm. They're just really in need of replacement, and this is an opportunity to think about how we go about configuring and replacing those, the dinghy dock, and then the location of the hand launch facility, and perhaps some of the things that you've talked about, the consideration of a zero depth launch entry. Not on this list, but in the staff report and in the conversation is the idea of also having this plan include Moonstone Park. And when we had this conversation with the city council, there was definitely a sense that Moonstone Park could be a very early home run in the process, that it could be really almost independently planned and be on a parallel track with some of the other work that we're doing. And I think, Councilmember Lowenstein and Councilmember Nierenheim both felt strongly that might be something you all want to consider is how do we deal with Moonstone Park, given it's not in this same zone as maybe some of these other improvements and could perhaps be done as its own standalone piece out on Mole B. So some food for thought and something for you to consider as you start to think about what that list should include. We did do some initial outreach. I talked to marine engineering firms. I talked to a couple of landscape architect firms. Not really sure who would have been the initial, and part of my rationale for having those conversations was, what kind of firm would be the lead and what kind of firm might be the sub, and how do they work together, and what do they think an effort like this might cost the city? And kind of independently, they all started throwing numbers out that were in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. And of course, without having a scope to look at, no final scope to really sit down and sink their teeth into, those numbers could change. If the scope is expanded, they could go up. If the scope is somewhat tailored and structured, perhaps in a more confined manner, that number may go down a little bit. But until we get a final scope out there and get proposals back, we won't exactly know. As I mentioned, we did go to the city council. Our specific direction at the city council was to ask them to recommend bringing this to you to seek your input regarding the scope of work for the plan. And then ultimately what would happen after that is we would bring a draft request for proposals back to the city council before that would then be released out to the professional firms who have this particular expertise. I did want to note to them, and I'll note to you that, because this wasn't part of the strategic plan, and because when we did this year's budget, we were already into the pandemic and we knew that we were going to be constrained in terms of funding, we didn't include this work effort as part of our 2021 work plan. And it also wasn't included as part of our 2021 budget. We actually made a fairly significant reduction in terms of our consultant and professional services contract line item, as you may recall. So this wasn't something that we had in the budgets. Now, as we started to think about how could we start to bring this forward and get working on this, we went to look into the capital improvement plan, where we have a couple of projects that are in the design phase. So the sport fishing pier is in the design phase, and we had a contractor already selected, Moffett and Nickel, and then we had some funding to start going forward with some Basin 3 seawall design work, but that money hasn't been allocated. And when you look at those two projects and you combine them together, there's about $290,000 that could be available to assist us if we wanted to redirect those monies into this type of a planning effort. Would require a budget adjustment, and we could do that as part of the mid-year budget cycle. So for you tonight, while we're seeking your input on the scope of work, as we were putting this together, I reached out to the planning department for some templates of RFPs, and I thought to myself, if I don't give you at least a whole draft RFP, you're going to maybe feel like there's some other pieces of this that you haven't had a chance to review. So I will throw the caveat out there that it is a draft, but I tried to give you a fairly complete draft of an RFP. So you have not only scope of work, you have submittal requirements, selection criteria. You have the pretty good framework of what the RFP would be. And we're certainly willing to take comments on any of those sections. Council's looking for your input on scope of work, but we as staff would take your input on any of those sections of the RFP that you feel like might need some revisions. So hopefully that's helpful to you as you've been looking at this process. That concludes my comments. I know the chair would like to make a few comments as well. So I'm going to, Chair Light, if it's okay with you, I'm going to click right to the first slide for you. And
Stephen,
now I can leave this up. However, how would you like to proceed?
So let's just get into the discussion.
Okay.
So just to clarify, when we attended the city council meeting, the action that I thought we had coming back to us was to provide direction on the scope and recommendations for the process. So that's what I was expecting to see tonight. So these slides went to both of those. Now, you've incorporated that into your RFP. So I was pleasantly surprised to see the draft RFP tonight, and I'd rather just dive into the RFP than go through this, because you've got 90% of what I had in my slides anyway. So first off, I want to applaud that you did give us a pretty complete draft of an RFP to review, and that you accommodated most of what I was concerned about from the start. So kudos on both sides. So we don't need to go through my slides. I appreciate you.
Okay. I do think there may be, just having looked at them, there may be some value to coming back to this kind of process slide if you'd like to do that. Just to make sure, there was a fair amount of conversation at the city council meeting, as you know, about the notion of having a subcommittee and how that workflow might occur. I didn't really. The RFP has a concept of that in there, and I don't know how well it lines up. I kind of drafted that before I had your slide, so I don't know how well it lines up with the slide, because the packet went out and then I think I got your slides, or it might have been right around the same time. So I didn't grab this as part of that conversation. So if there's something here that you think you want to discuss for possible incorporation, I leave that to you.
Okay. Well, I can walk through this slide really quickly for the other members here. So we can go through the amenities separately, the scope, but the process that I came up with, kind of as a straw man to shoot at, was that there'd be two activities. Start out with two activities in parallel. One, we select one or more subcommittees to support this activity, and I'll get to why there may be more than one. It relates to Moonstone Park, separated from the rest of the amenities plan. And in parallel, the city would go about selecting, a consultant to do the amenities plan. Then my concept was that for 3 months, the consultant, staff, and the harbor subcommittee that we would pick would develop what I call the 60% plan. In other words, something to put out to the public and the rest of the harbor commission to take shots at and give guidance, so we don't get too far along. And my thoughts in doing that were, if you followed, we've had two kind of different approaches to defining stuff in the harbor since I've been on the commission. One was the boat ramp workshops, where I felt like that, the staff and the consultant kind of went in a direction that I think the harbor commission subcommittee could have averted from the start and got us to something more viable more quickly. So I wanted to avert having that false step of just of wasting a workshop and a meeting. And then the second one was the sport fishing pier, where we kind of came in with a blank sheet and just took everything from everybody. And now as a result, there's no way we can accommodate everybody's inputs on the sport fishing pier. So I wanted to kind of take those two lessons learned and get a small subcommittee that doesn't require Brown Act, somebody recording every meeting we have. And so that progress can happen between Harbor Commission meetings to get with the consultant, the staff, and maybe some other stakeholders to kind of jointly work on a direction to come up with a 60% design or something around that. And I thought that would take about 3 months, since we're kind of norming and storming and not performing yet. And then we come to a joint Harbor Commission public workshop, the first of 2 of those, and get feedback both from the Harbor Commission and any of the public that cares to opine on that. And then take that back in the same group. Would take about 2 months to come up with, as complete a plan as we can based on those inputs. Give the Harbor Commission and a public workshop one more shot at it, incorporate any other changes, and then Harbor Commission would review and make final recommended actions to send it to City Council or correct it to go to City Council. So that was my recommended process. My goal was to get it done in 6 months because, I hate seeing things like this drag on, and I think it's doable in a 6-month period. If you can go to the next slide. So also Councilman Narenheim, and I believe it was supported by Councilman Lowenstein, and I think Mayor Brand even commented on it. We've got a very, mature plan for Mole B, and so perhaps we could separate that from the rest of the amenities plan and get it done more quickly. So I did a similar process with a separate subcommittee with about 1 month intervals. The problem with that one, though, I will say from the start, is having more joint commission and public workshops is probably tough to do. So that's my one concern with trying to accelerate it. It's really then three Harbor Commission meetings with public workshops if you do it that way. So those were my thoughts going into it, but I think you accommodated most of the ideas that I had, in the RFP, Stephen, but you left it, more broadly to the contractor to come back with, what they would do. So, and I'm open to that because, we don't want to dictating something like this may drive up cost, and they may have a better way of doing it. So I like the way you worded most of it. I have a couple nits that I wanted to cover. If we could, you can take this down just, on your section B in your RFP, draft RFP, you say establish, and I don't think it's up to the consultant to establish the subcommittee and all of that. I think it's more appropriate to say collaborate with a subcommittee.
So what we can do, Chair Light, is Elizabeth does have this available to us live, so we can make some red line edits if you'd like us to do that. We could do it on the screen. We could take everybody's, that might, where we could take comments and we could make those edits and then put them on to council, however you'd like to kind of approach it. But if you have really specific comments like this, I think we could just pull the document up, have it shared, and just make the edit right on the screen if you'd like to do it.
Well, let's try it that way. But my fear is, drafting a document like that may get too complex. So if we get too bogged down,
I wasn't going to go down that road.
Concepts and let you guys run with it.
Okay, so you're on section B. Let me get my version here. There we go. Okay, under established working committee.
Yeah, I don't think it's up to them to establish the working committee. It's up to us to define it, and for them to, I don't know what the word is, collaborate with that committee or integrate them into their process, something to that extent.
All right.
In section D, I think that's the appropriate place to really do the scope. The upfront part's kind of narrative. So D is where we get to the scope. I felt like we left out some of the stuff. We talked about an education facility and the white sea bass grow out facility, and that's not in there. So I'm open to council, the rest of the commission's input on whether they'd like to see those things in there. And in the section that then goes into the separating out Moonstone Park, something about accelerating that schedule, because that was the goal in separating it, was to accelerate that and get an early win.
Okay.
And I will say, you know, I got an email, I think we all did, from Mark Hansen about incorporating AES and dry mass storage and the breakwall extension. Personally, I am a proponent of the breakwall extension, but I don't think that's an amenity we should be doing here. I mean, that's my personal view. I'm open to others. The AES site is private property. I don't think it appropriate to expand into that one. And I think you addressed massed up dry storage, maybe not to the extent Mark wanted, but in the Moonstone Park element. So I'm actually okay with it, with leaving it as is, unless somebody has some more detailed write-up. And then on E, where you talk about implementation, we talk about, you know, ways of getting grants. Did you intend to have something about a rough, you know, ROM cost of the amenities as recommended?
Well, we could talk about that. You know, that as you know, to get to something that we could then start to kind of put rough order of magnitude, it depends on how far we may want to evolve. I'll use the word design with a small d, the design or the of each of the individual components. You know, when we did the public boat launch facility, for example, I mean, we had a broad range of numbers for all these different sort of alternatives. We might be able to look at some planning level or engineering level estimates. It probably depends on how far we're able to advance some of the particular concepts that we would feel comfortable in terms of what those numbers are.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's hard for us to come up with an amenities plan with that idea of the cost that we're imposing on the city to do it. I mean, you know, we could say put a mile-long seaside lagoon in that has, you know, bridges over it to get to the sport fishing pier. And I just don't, you know, unless we have something bounding it with a cost and complexity level, it's tough to bound.
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, what we did, for example, you know, with the with the sport fishing pier, was we tasked the consultant, and I agree with you. We did that blank exercise, and we kind of got more than what we could probably ever program onto the sport fishing pier. What we did task them with was, once we ultimately could figure out what that design and what the programmatic elements would be to help us identify different pots of money that might be available to us. You know, without necessarily knowing how big the number is, could we, you know, get a Department of Boating and Waterways grant? You know, are there other, open space recreation grant funding available? So I envisioned this being a little bit more of kind of a helping us figure out maybe where there are some pots of money that might be available to us. But if we want to expand it, we certainly could, advance the plan to a level where we could generate cost estimates that are sufficient for us to start to identify possible funding sources. So,
yeah, I don't want to drag this, make this longer than it needs to be. Maybe just something like an indication of, magnitude of cost or something like if something drives a big cost or something like that, just to help steer us.
Okay.
Because I agree, if you ask a contractor for money, I know if they did that to my company, I'd get a lot more antsy on, the level of detail and level of effort to generate.
Right.
So I'm sensitive to that. And then my last comment is in Roman numeral 5, where you talk about it taking 12 months, but then you say 6 months, for the workshops and everything, and then 3 months for the approvals at the commission. So I'm wondering why you didn't go to 9 months.
Yeah, we could. I mean, I was trying to just give them a sense. We probably should do that, final 3 months. Because I do think by the time we go through Harbor Commission and City Council, and it might take a couple of City Council meetings to go through that process, that's usually a couple of months to do that. If we're being conservative, we could say 3 months. I guess the sense was, we could just change that second phrase to say 9 months just to make the math work. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, or say it's a target and then see what they come back with.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay. I think that's the end of my comments. So ask the forbearance of the rest of the commission for me taking so much time up front. So with that, I don't know what order the hands came up with, so I'm going to go in the order I see them on the screen. So Vicky, you're up first.
Actually, Roger was before me.
Okay, then Roger.
Oh, thanks, but okay. So a couple things. Been thinking about this for about a month, as people said. This came up at the city council meeting, and I was thinking of one more thing to add to the list, and that's something for the concerts and the Beach Life Festival. That's in there in the Seaside Lagoon stuff, but in the future, it could be so important to us and such a big part of Redondo, maybe it needs its own bullet. Maybe you end up burying that stuff within Seaside Lagoon. Maybe that's where the bathrooms and sewer and so forth are. But, I would love to have someone like Alan Sanford in some working group somewhere and make sure those things go smoother and the septic tank never backs up on day 2 of the festival.
Yeah, well, Stephen left it open to for other stakeholders. Certainly, someone like Alan could be it. I'd be cautious of just singling out Beach Life Festival. I mean, there could be other concerts. So I agree with the concept. I think we might want to not be so specific on.
Sure. I'm only suggesting. I guess my suggestion would be that we elevate the public concert element from something underneath Seaside Lagoon to its own bullet, and proposing that for discussion. Not dying on my sword over it.
And Commissioner Carlson, if I could just, as I'm trying to think through, are we really almost thinking about almost just special events and not even just limiting it to concerts?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The more global, we want to have a plan that allows and considers special event activity.
Yeah, I mean, specifically what I'm thinking of is Seaside Lagoon, as it is over the last decade or two, it works really well for Super Bowl 10K. It handles that group of people inside of that fence really well. Or, maybe it used to, maybe it needs a facelift for that, but events are starting to grow outside of that fence line. And, if we're thinking about a master plan for future amenities, it's worth considering that.
Yep.
Another sort of general comment on the draft, and thank you very much for having this draft. Really, it's really helpful to have, see all this and have something to throw darts at. On page 4 in section 4, you say research documents will be available. I'm wondering if we can see a list of those or review those or work on those with you. Things I'm thinking of are, the right amount of information, not too much.
Yeah.
I've never seen the latest boat launch I've never seen the latest boat ramp design. We've talked about there being a design which does meet Measure C. I've never seen the latest Moonstone Park design. I was looking around for a summary of all the comments on the sport fishing pier. I'm sure all that stuff is out there. Potentially we should work with you on the right amount to put there and not too much. We don't want to scare anybody.
Yeah, and I'll confess that when I wrote that paragraph, I don't know that I knew how much was out there. I know we have a lot of stuff in our files, and it was kind of just, and so I tried to write it a little more generic, just because we're going to have to do a little. I wasn't here when the Moonstone Park design process was underway. I'm going to have to reach out to some people and pull some documents and assemble that stuff. I was around for the most recent, boat launch conversation, so probably have that a little more readily accessible. So the idea was really just to make sure that, anybody coming into this process knows they're not necessarily starting from scratch, and they don't have to, we have some data that's available to them so that when they're putting their proposal together, they shouldn't just assume that we don't know anything. Well, we know a lot in terms of what's gone on before us. We may not all agree on what we all know, but we do know that there's been work done, and we need to kind of bring that all to the table so that we can sort through the pieces and go from there. So I hear you. And we're going to be kind of one of the next things Elizabeth and I have to start working on is figuring out what that treasure trove of documents is and how we kind of put it into some kind of an order that's workable for someone.
Good luck. You know, if we can offer you any help or a subcommittee or something, you know, don't hesitate to yell.
We may take that.
I don't know what to put there either.
Yeah.
But I saw that and I said, wow, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
My next comment, this is kind of minor. On page 6, in the submittal, you say,
well, hold on.
10
hold
copy.
Hold on a second,
Sorry.
Roger. I'd ask, you know, what is it you want them to put in section 4 then? I mean, do we want to bind, this is an RFP, so we wouldn't say, you know, in this that the city staff has to coordinate with, you know, the Harbor Commission on the contents.
Yeah. So honestly, I don't know. I mean, I might put in Measure C. I haven't read it in a while. I might put in, we might put in the comments on the sport fishing pier. I read those when that survey initially closed, and it was the kitchen sink in a burrito wrapped in a turducken. I mean, it was everything to everybody. And it was, I don't know how a contractor walking into this would accommodate all that history in one 100-foot pier. So I don't know what I would put in because I haven't seen all these things. I've never seen the Moonstone Park design. I've never seen the final boat ramp design.
I don't think in the RFP we need to specify what all documents they see. Maybe we have a separate motion to work with us. Maybe we identify the subcommittee tonight and ask that the Stephen and his team work with us to help establish that list. What do you think of that, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it's not a bad idea. I mean, you know, a perfect example is, you know, Measure C. I probably should have listed that when I said general plan, local coastal plan, Measure C, Measure G, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that, and you know, some of it may be more applicable than other. Measure C, absolutely, because there are certain specifications in Measure C related to the boat ramp, related to Seaside Lagoon, that anybody who's doing an amenities plan is going to have to review what that measure includes for those parameters and make sure they're incorporating that into the design concept and into the planning effort. So that's a yes. Measure G, I don't know. Jim, you know Measure G really well. Does that need to be in the folder?
Well, I honestly think if we just gave them the zoning and LCP, they have what's left of, well, we didn't alter G, so of all of G and all of C, right?
Yeah. So, you know, and how much of that they need to, you know, review as part of the process. I went back and looked at the name's escaping me now. The Harbor Civic Center specific plan. You know, I kind of went back and skimmed through that, and I was like, it's not real heavy on open space. You know, there's a lot of discussion of open space and amenity elements in there, but it is a specific plan related to the area, so they probably ought to at least take a look at it. You know, just to get some good context, I think. But to the second paragraph, I do think we, you know, to the extent we've done some work like Moonstone Park, I agree. I don't know exactly how you capture the sport fishing conversation to date. Maybe we put in a couple of the concept designs that they drew up and just to say, hey, these were, you know, was early in we may have to write a little summary that says this was early in the process. These were a couple of early concept designs. We're going to have to work with them to help them understand what it is they're getting.
Well, I think having the subcommittee work with them, along with yourselves, the staff and other stakeholders, they'll get that history too. But for the purposes of putting together their response to the RFP, I think it helps to have some scoping documents in there like that. Yeah.
That was the idea, was just to give them, to help them understand kind of where we were in the process.
So maybe we'll have just saving for later when we get to resolutions or actions, a resolution to identify that list of stuff separately, and maybe a subcommittee so we don't have to wait till the next Harbor Commission to do it. we'll leave that for when we get to resolutions. We're just in discussion now.
Got it.
I don't have too much more. On page 6 in the submittal, you ask for 10 paper copies, and I was just wondering why no electronic.
We can do electronic. It just depends on, sometimes when we distribute them citywide, or there's some folks that want to have it, we could certainly do it electronically. I'm not opposed to that. There are still some people who like to see the paper.
Oh, I'm not questioning the paper. I'm just, wondering if you need more than 10 copies and, you end up photocopying it or scanning it in yourself, or, so 10 plus point. Electronic, or I don't know.
Yep.
Whatever you think.
And if they
great catch. We should
if
do
they submit electronic, then it's easier to incorporate. You don't have to scan and you lose resolution and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. We should do 10 plus 1 electronic. We will do.
Great. Okay. Thanks. And, my final question comes out of the discussion about subcommittees and stuff. What's the harm of having a bigger committee and having to accommodate the Brown Act and having to, agendize it and produce minutes and so forth? Does it slow things down? Is it more expensive?
So my thoughts, my reason for saying a smaller subcommittee is so that I would anticipate that to make progress, we'll have to meet more than once a month. So to get a quorum of the commission, that's going to be tough to do. I'd like to get this thing done fast. And secondly, it does, at least in my view, it does drive up the cost, because you got to take minutes, you got to, publish them and get them reviewed and all of that kind of stuff. So I was attempting to limit that, not to limit transparency, but to expedite getting through this process. I don't want it to be a year and a half. And
yeah, fair enough. I guess put another way, are the public workshops agendized? Can we all go to one of those, or do we have to draw straws and somebody sits it out?
No,
Jim, your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did. We had formal Harbor Commission meeting for the workshops on the boat ramp and on the sport fishing pier. So that's why I put that way, so that the whole commission gets a chance to weigh in on, at certain points, rather than wait to the end and then just take shots at it.
Okay, good. That's really what I meant.
Yeah.
And we had, when we did, we've done the, since I've been here, we've done the public workshops on the boat ramp on 2 different occasions. And, at the time we had almost a completely different composition of the Harbor Commission. And there were members of the commission that wanted to come to true public workshops. So we had one out at the yacht club, right? And all we did was just remind them in that setting where we're not, we don't have a formal agenda. We're not sitting in the council chamber or on a Zoom call or something, where we've structured it as a joint public workshop Harbor Commission meeting. That if folks thought it was beneficial to maybe have a public workshop in an off-site location, would just be, if the Harbor Commissioners attended, that they just be mindful of violations of not gather together and discuss items, or, have inner discussions among themselves at the workshop, that they were really more there as kind of observers and getting a chance to hear what the public had to say in those settings. And then, as Jim said, what we did was, for the last time we did the boat ramp conversations, I think we had 2 public workshops that were like that. I think one was in the library and one was at the yacht club. And then we did have a Harbor Commission meeting in which we had a workshop as well. So that was the opportunity then for the commissioners to really, in a more structured, formal setting, provide their comments. So we can be a little flexible with it. We just have to be mindful that if we do the first kind of public workshop and more than 3 of you show up, the appearance and how that interaction occurs.
Yeah, I just think
thanks.
I think that's dangerous. That's why I'm advocating that the workshops be formal, so we don't get in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. It was a little uncomfortable at the time, sort of trying to suggest to commissioners that maybe they shouldn't go to public workshops so that they wouldn't run afoul of the Brown Act. It ultimately worked out fine, but I think it was more just luck that it worked out fine, and we didn't have, somebody inadvertently violate the Brown Act when they weren't where they really weren't, they didn't mean to, but it just kind of happened, right?
Great, thanks. That's it. Thanks, Vicky.
Okay, Vicky.
I don't have a lot. I think it's well done, well presented, but I have to say it's kind of like Groundhog Day. We just keep doing the same things over and over and over. We have the workshops, we come up with a plan, it gets put on a shelf, it ages, we can't use it anymore, we have to start over. I would like to see, I've been here 5 years, going on 6, and I haven't seen anything change. Yeah, we had Center Cal and it brought everything to a screeching halt. But, we've been over the sport fishing pier so many times and over the boat ramp. I mean, years before I even got here. And I would just like to see something stick. It's like we keep throwing stuff against the wall. Nothing happens. Moonstone was completely agreed upon. We had a plan. We have the funding and nothing's happened. It's still not happened. And now we're starting over at ground zero. It's just very frustrating. And I'm not sure that this next 9 months or whatever it's going to take is going to offer anything different. What's going to change?
Well, I think there have been some intervening things, not necessarily related to Moonstone. Moonstone is its own kind of animal, but putting Moonstone over on the side for just a second, in the time that I've been here, which is about the same time, 5 or 6 years, when I got here, we were already deep into the Center Cal conversations and the waterfront project conversation. And that clearly was driving timeline and the ability to implement some of these improvements at the time. Once the litigation began on that kind of stalled the efforts as well. I think we're finally at the point where, and why I think this exercise is important and relevant is that for one of the bullets that I made in the presentation, which is I do think it's important for us to understand the interrelationships of a few of these different improvements. In other words, I would be hesitant to just simply do the boat ramp. It would be great to get it done and just get it implemented and get the improvement in place. But each of these things have other, ramifications that sort of spin off from them. When we've had these conversations, we've, talked about different kinds of elements that need to be considered. We had one diagram of the boat ramp where we had some questions about how the public circulation was going to occur, that people had to go back and forth across the ramp and what kinds of issues were associated with that. So I think the hope here is that, I can certainly tell you that there's a sense from a lot of us that, the boat ramp is kind of a linchpin in the sense that there are people who might want to come and do some things in the harbor as a public and or private investment who are caught up in this notion that they can't move forward because of the requirement that the boat ramp needs to be implemented. And so I do think that's a pressing issue that needs to be addressed. I just think we've just had a set of circumstances that we've been confronted with that have kept us from moving things forward over the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm more optimistic now at this point that if we can get a framework and we understand where all these different pieces go, that we then have the opportunity to try to advance some of those individual pieces through the process. I'll give you a great example on how I think this could be valuable. We have had a conversation about the sport fishing pier in terms of what could be on the pier or what might not be on the sport fishing pier. I'm not sure that I've ever heard in my time here a really extensive conversation as to whether we should have a sport fishing pier at all and whether that's an appropriate use of resources. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I do know that question has been thrown out there in the past as to whether that's an amenity that we even want to put back in the harbor. You all, I'm sure each one of you has an opinion about that. But I heard about it a little bit at the beginning in the Center Cal project. At one point, they maybe had proposed that they weren't going to have it, and then it kind of came back. But I don't really remember a lot of dialogue throughout the project process about whether that was important to have or not. And I just use that as an example. So I hear you, and we get the frustration as well. Look, we'd like to move some projects forward as well. And I do think this is going to be the next vehicle to help us do that. Last thing I'll say is I hope, given the conversation we just had, the fact that we've done some groundwork on this means we are going all the way back to ground zero. I mean, I'm hoping we can go back and grab that Moonstone Park plan, pull it out, hand it to the consultant team and have them look at it. And if it's on its own track, maybe they can kind of get through that pretty quick and say, what still works? What's relevant? Do we want to keep it as is? Is there anything we want to tweak or change? And if not, let's start to push that through the process. So
Yeah, my whole thing is I just don't want to spend another year spinning our wheels and have nothing to show for it again. It just is a very frustrating, fruitless treadmill. We're walking and walking and walking and we're not getting anywhere. And I know COVID's going to put a monkey wrench on a lot of funding. I know a lot of funds that used to be there aren't going to be there anymore. And talking about it's really nice, but I want to see something done.
So I think it's up to us to pressure the council to make sure something happens.
Okay. I have one quick question. I don't know if this ties in, but the splash wall and the lights that fell in Mole A, is that going to be addressed? All the street lights that were on top of the splash wall fell down.
Okay. I mean, that's an open sort of question as to whether you want that in the amenities plan or
But the
not.
splash wall, if it goes, nobody can get into the harbor.
Right.
And it's looking pretty raggedy after the last storm.
What are you talking about the splash wall, Vicky?
Have you driven by it and looked at it?
Not recently.
You do. All the street lights that were up on top of it fell off.
The navigation lights?
No, the street lights that light the wall, the
yacht
street
club?
that goes from.
Are you
Where
talking outside the yacht club there where it arcs around?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought when
And
you said, I got confused when you said you couldn't enter the harbor.
Yeah, well, you couldn't enter the harbor because if the splash wall is broken, water comes in.
Well, so let me see if I can tease this one out a little bit. So to me, that's probably two separate issues. So the break wall is still part of the Army Corps of Engineers,
Right.
slow moving Army Corps of Engineer project to do the repair work that needs to be done on the break wall where it's been scalloped out and there's some other issues associated with it.
This is the interior splash wall.
Yeah. So what I would say is if you want to add that to the public amenities plan, we should probably be really clear that we're talking about that portion of the splash wall. Some people call it the Galveston wall, that goes from, where the yacht club is back around to,
The chart house.
the chart house. Yeah. Maybe that's the best way to define it, is to say that's the public amenity that we're trying to.
And I don't know if it's public amenity. It's integral to the harbor. If it isn't there, you can't get in.
That sounds more like something we need to do on an emergency basis than for an amenities plan.
Yeah, if you look where all the lights fell down, I mean, they're regular street lights that were atop the splash wall, and 2 or 3 of them fell down and crashed.
Okay. I mean, I'll leave it to you as to whether you want to include it in the plan. I will follow up right away after this to see.
Well, I separate amenities from emergency necessities.
Yeah.
I don't see that as an amenity.
Okay. Well, then why don't, if it's okay with you, why don't I just take that away as an item that you've kind of reported to us and check on the status of that? And because
Count it as a referral to staff.
Yeah, that's something we probably ought to get, if Public Works isn't on it already, which I bet they are, but if they're not, we can certainly make them aware of it. And
no, they were down there. They cleared the street lights are 20 feet tall, and they fell across the road. So
yeah,
they're
so
gone.
they know about it, but I can check with them and see what their work is for that.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
I'm finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Matt, I think you were next. You're on mute, Matt.
There we go. So yes, I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Callahan said with regards to feeling like we're on a treadmill, especially having been part of the Mole B master plan. But I do agree, Commissioner Light's idea, and Director Proud's idea of separate tracking Moonstone Park and trying to get a shovel in the ground there. The funding's there, the master plan's there. Somebody commented when they first came on the commission, the idea they had multiple goals in mind, and I said if they get one of those done, they should consider their time on the Harbor Commission to be a great success, because as someone once said, it's the speed of government. So for that reason, I support the idea of subcommittees because it will make it move along faster, more cost effective, and be able to get down the road. In that same vein, there's been a lot of criticism of trying to put 10 gallons worth of, well, use anything you want, stuff in a 5-gallon harbor. And we have this big long list of amenities, but I'm not sure we're prioritizing them. We sit there and talk about the boat ramp going in someplace impacting other areas. I would argue that the position of the boat ramp, the location of the boat ramp has to be a priority. Everything else has to take a back seat to it. So I would like the process to focus on the boat ramp with the other amenities. In fact, there were like 3 or 4 things that seemed to come up on that list: the sea level rise, the boat ramp. There's one other that escapes me for right now, but Seaside Lagoon, the boat ramp, and sea level rise. If those are prioritized as far as what we're doing with those for the next 20 years, and figure out and get that going, because the education center, we don't know, might end up on the Sea Lab location that had obviously been, but I agree that's not really appropriate to put that area into this master plan yet. The bigger you make the area, the longer it's going to take. But there are some amenities that may ultimately not need to go in what we're talking about, from Portofino Way to the International Boardwalk. The outrigger canoes and zero entry. Personally, I think that should be part of Seaside Lagoon, but I'll let that process move forward and see where that goes. It was obviously part of the discussion with Mole B. So maybe there has to be some back and forth, some interchange, some cross discussion between subcommittees if you have 2 separate subcommittees on what's appropriate for one versus the other. But I think it's important we prioritize our amenities, and with the understanding that some things just may not fit, and that includes the sports fishing pier. Personally, in today's economy, looking at our budget, I find it hard to justify $6 million on a sports fishing pier, because that was the estimated cost of the sports fishing pier. Piers are loss leaders. They're there to get people to come down to your venue and spend money, not just on that location, but on surrounding areas. And we already have that in our main pier. And I think some of the uses that the sports fishing pier had entertained in the past have been really relocated, and we can accommodate other places. So from a priority point of view, I don't put that in the top 3 at all. So yes, Commissioner Callahan, totally agree with you. Like, if we can move down the road and get a location agreed upon, we have a framework, as Commissioner Light, I'm sure, with our various measures between Measure C. Measure C is pretty much the framework for that. So the description's there, what it needs to, the bill it needs to fit, so to speak. Same thing with Seaside Lagoon. If you get that done on this amenities, and then discuss sea level rise and what we're going to do with that. Sorry, I have grandchildren wanting to say good night. But anyway, I'm pretty much done. That's pretty much where I was going with that. Whoa. Never mind. Ignore all that.
Are you done, Matt? Okay.
Yes, I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Let's see. I see two hands up. I don't know which of you were first. So, Tom, do you want to go?
Sure. I believe Steve's hands was up first. Steve, you want to go?
Either way, Tom. I think I was up first, but you can go. It's fine.
All right. And mine's pretty quick. I have just a couple things. One, I'd love to see added something about electric car charging infrastructure, because the entire nation in California is moving towards that, and without L2 chargers sitting around everywhere, and they're a draw. So somehow the electric infrastructure should be, this would be a good time to at least, and we try and figure out how to get that paid for or put in. And I'm still, ever since the Fun Factory, it's something central to the pier, and I don't know if it's the sports fishing. I don't know what should be there. At one point, I thought it would, an aquarium or something like that would be a nice idea. Something that is a big draw for the pier. And lastly, this concept of an overall thing where like a view of the pier beautification and theming kind of concept, maybe electronic maps and murals around that kind of unifies what the pier looks like and makes it more attractive than what it looks like now. It may not be a big spend kind of thing, but it just seems like looking at a big picture kind of thing and make people feel good when they get there and know where to go kind of stuff. So if you had an electronic map, for kids, check this out or whatever, but something that we could have updated and make it really, audience friendly kind of thing.
So I question the ability for the contractor or the subcommittee to do that when, we're just placing the amenities at this point, putting electronic maps on a project we don't know what will look like on the commercial side seems premature.
Yeah, I don't know how those get, like we're going to be looking for funding.
On the developer for the commercial side, not for the amenities plan. I mean, that's my thought. I think if we get too in the weeds, we'll never get through this.
Yeah, I will say, as far as the last bullet point goes, we are doing a few different things kind of through our capital improvement program. So one of the things that we're working on, and you may have noticed it's not going as quickly as we all might like, but we're slowly refurbishing some of the railings that are out there, the rusted railings. They're repainting them, they're refurbishing the railings. My understanding is that we now have some lights for replacing some of the rusted out and older looking lights. So we have the standard that we used kind of up by the Redondo landing. That light standard has now been purchased for incorporation around the pier as well. One of our public works projects is to, which you all heard about a little while ago. It's been slowed down by kind of COVID issues, but the refurbishment of the sails, and kind of doing a little upgrade on the sails that are out there and bringing those back to life a little bit. So we do have some things in our public, capital improvement plan that our public works crews are doing that fits into this category. The map itself, it's interesting. We've had a conversation with, I think the conversation happened at the King Harbor Association to talk about an electronic map to take the place of, there is a map that's down at the harbor now, kind of a directory sign that's there. We constantly have to reprint it and update it and make changes to it. And so one thought was, well, maybe we take that directory sign out and we do something like what they did down in the village with one of those electronic directory signs that you can do some messaging on as well. I think it would just be a question of whether you want the public amenities plan to take a more formal approach to unifying that program in some way, making it, I hate the word thematic, but something that kind of gives it some unification across the harbor or not. I think would be the way to maybe be captured if it's important to you all to do that. If it's more important to kind of focus in on some of the key pieces of the amenity program, then maybe that's a second tier effort. I don't want presume to know which way you want to go on that. I just throw that out there as information for you.
Right, but that is what I was suggesting, just sort of a mention though, so that it gets looked at, that we have an overall theme.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like the aquarium kind of thing, or a centralized, draw is obviously just pulling stuff out of the clouds. But certainly the electric infrastructure for car charging seems like it would be something needed as we're moving forward.
So other than specifying that it's required, what would you have the amenities plan show for electric charging? Would we go through the parking lot and show where they should be?
I think it'd be interesting to look at as far as the numbers that would be required in there, given the number of cars, kind of thing. You'd certainly, where they're located would probably have a lot to do with where power is and what reduces the cost of installing them. It's just that since we're advancing the pier into the future, that kind of thing, I think we should at least mention it. It's kind of a thought anyway, to get it in there that this is something that we should think about anyway. Even if you go down to Hermosa, for instance, Hermosa is just, they are identifying themselves as a green city. And you go anywhere. You can go and stop, and there are electric all up and down Pier Avenue now. You can park. They even provide you free parking as well as free electricity. And it's a draw, right?
I don't disagree with that. I just question whether that's part of the amenities plan or part of an RFP you give to the developer.
Well, I guess I'm confused. Where would it go? Where you want to, at some point, say we would like these things, and how much, what does it take to get them there, It is an amenity. It is.
And again, you could include it in something, on that laundry list that might just say something like, along with everything else, a distribution and a plan for the location and distribution of electric car charging stations. It may not be the right words, but something along that on that plan. But it's up to you all as to whether you want to throw that into the scope or whether you think that's better tackled a different way.
Okay.
Than trying to add it on and tack it onto this plan. So that's your call.
Okay. Anything else, Tom?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. First, generally, I support Jim's approach, Chairman Light's approach that he proposed in terms of the process. I think that's a good idea. I like the idea of subcommittees. It would expedite things, number one. Number two, I am a consultant, so I've seen plenty of RFPs, and scope is very important here. I think it's a good discussion to have. And to some degree, scope is good because it guides the consultant to what it is we want, but also to some degree, it handcuffs him. So we have to be a little cautious in that regard. And to Tom's point, Tom, you kind of stole my thunder there. I like the idea of having some creative aspect to this. I'm not sure how to put it in here. There's been some discussion earlier about how we're somewhat regurgitating prior plans. And I understand that many of the commissioners have worked on these plans in past years, and it's hard to give up ideas and all the work that's been done. So many of these ideas probably need to be reviewed and looked at and brought forward and maybe adjusted, maybe abandoned. I don't know. That's maybe something for the subcommittee to review and for the consultant to kind of decide. But I do think that we need some creative element to this. It's just my thought. And I think that goes to what Tom was saying. I look at the pier as differently because I don't own a boat. I don't go down there and kayak and do those kind of things. A lot of the elements I see here are for people who want to go down and enjoy the water, which we should have. I look at it strictly from a family perspective. The arcade that was down there was an attraction. It wasn't a beautiful attraction, but it was an attraction. I know plenty of people in Redondo, friends of mine and residents who went down there to enjoy that attraction. Now it's no longer there. I don't know whether it's an aquarium. I don't know whether it's a Ferris wheel. I don't know what it is. But I do think that as a public amenity, we need a creative element, something different. And so we keep bringing forward prior plans or prior ideas that, like I said, I don't want to pick out any particular work that's been done before and cast stones on it or anything. I'm just saying that I like to see some creative element in this RFP that gives a little what's been done before and maybe have some ideas to work with the subcommittee and come forward with an amenity that maybe hasn't been thought of before. And you know what? To Vicky's point, it may just go on the shelf for a year or two, but guess what? We have some creative element. It's in a plan. It was thought of. The city council knows we're thinking about something, and maybe in the future there's money for a Ferris wheel or aquarium or whatever it is. And it's something that we thought about, and who knows, it might get implemented. So that's it. I just throw it out there for a thought for the chairman, for the rest of the commission. I like to see some creative element here to give the consultant a little freedom to come up with something new.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Steve. Stephen, is your intent to take these and then come back to the commission, or go straight to the?
Well, that's a good question, and that, if we were able to get to the point tonight where we could, feel like we had a scope that was tight enough that, or you all felt comfortable enough that we could then just go ahead and incorporate into into the RFP and go right to the city council with the draft, that would be the most expeditious. If you'd like for us to try to take some of this and see if there's a way to weave a few of these suggestions into the RFP and bring it back to you, we could certainly do that as well. It just adds another 30 days to the process.
Yeah. So my personal preference, and we all get a say in it, but my personal preference is that we hope expedite this, not slow it down.
Yeah.
So
that was my thought, was that you were going to, I knew that's what was going to be your recommendation, would be to try to get through this tonight so that maybe we could just go straight to council with this.
Yeah, and that's why I so appreciate you coming up with the draft RFP, because that would have been a comeback. So
right.
Jim, can I make one more comment? Yes. I forgot to mention one more thing, Jim, real quick. Sorry about that. I just want to support Tom's point about beautification of that area. I think that's another element which we should add to the RFP.
Which area? You broke up.
Beautification or facelift of the International Boardwalk in particular. To me, it's not a specific public amenity per se, but I do think that that area does need a bit of a facelift. And again, if we're trying to use that as a means to attract and provide an amenity to members of Redondo Beach and the public, I think to me, a beautification should be part of this RFP as well. And that's I'm just giving Tom a little support in that regard.
So we would ask the consultant to come up with how to beautify the existing boardwalk as it is today, is what you're.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I mean, we're laying in here. Our RFP says a plan for the future use, design, and layout of Seaside Lagoon. So I don't see why we couldn't add a line item.
I mean, my thought, and I don't want to debate it here, but my thought on that is that's a city amenity, where the International Boardwalk is something probably going to have a developer do, not something the city would do. I'm just brainstorming here, so don't.
Yeah, I understand.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. It needs a facelift. I mean, a lot of it does. So let's keep it moving. Roger, you got
I have my hand up for the second time. Leslie hasn't gone first time yet, so
Leslie,
please let everybody else go first once.
Okay, forgive me if my thoughts are not well put together. I got a bunch of bullets here. First of all, thank you so much for putting this draft RFP together. I echo a lot of what's been said in that, we don't want, a bathroom that's remove and replace. We do want some creativity and amenity improvement, not just So I think that needs to come across, and also it was mentioned our priorities. I feel like we need to somehow convey kind of, it's a tough line, right? We don't want to over constrain them, but we want to give them some insight into some priorities. With the resource documents and the things that have been done before the planning, I'm not intimately aware of, like where we landed on the pier and the dock and such, but I guess we don't want them to spend a bulk of their effort rehashing, opening up a can of worms and starting from scratch. We want to take some nuggets from that, right? So somehow we need to, whatever we give to them and what we project will be available to them, doesn't make it seem completely wide open. Let's see. I think we want to, in conveying kind of what Tom was saying about, beautification, convey to them a goal of interconnectedness of a master plan that speaks to people coming to the site from both sides, from the ocean side and visitors by car, by bike, by walking, and also to maximize the use throughout the year. So thinking creatively about how we can use the amenities in the area, like the lagoon. Maybe you can use the lagoon for, little RC boats in the off season, for example. And the way we have those amenities so that we're, I guess, minimally, we're maximizing our use. We're not, with the lagoon having this huge area walled off when maybe we could use a part like the playground structure in the sand in the off season. I didn't see, now maybe I missed it, the zero depth launch access mentioned.
It's in there.
Okay. To Roger's earlier.
It says consider it. I forget the exact wording, but.
Okay. I agree with what Roger said about special events, but I would also couch it as just like community gathering events. So it can even just be city sponsored events. We don't really have a city gathering other than in the circle in front of the library, some sort of, some of the, landscaping such that you could have community gathering events. I didn't understand the limitation, the boundaries from Portofino to Quality Seafood. For two things, if we're talking master plan, I think we would want to include the longer length of the shoreline there, but also, recognizing there wouldn't be as much work that goes into some of the northern and southern elements, but thinking about the language you had in there about bike connectedness, I think if you kind of stop it at Quality Seafood, then that might take away some of the creativity of how they might tie that together better. And I didn't know if the skateboard park, if that needed to be mentioned in here. I wasn't sure with how far that was going along.
To my view, that was pretty much a done deal. That's been approved by the council, right, Stephen? I would hate to come back and say, no, don't do it. That's kind of wasting our time.
No, I agree. I think.
However, that's made known that it will be there to the.
Yeah, and maybe to the earlier point that Roger made, frankly, when I wrote this, I hadn't even thought about that, but that might be some of the documents that go, even if it's just that little concept plan that they presented to you, just so that the consultant understands, how far the thought has evolved. Completed design. We haven't got a final design approved by, the harbor commissioner, the planning department, or the city council for that matter. But we do have a notion that we want to move forward with a skate park in that location.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
helping them understand the status of that.
So I
Okay.
think, my comfort level goes up on this quite a bit. I mean, we have to have a document somebody can price to, but the fact that, we're going to have a subcommittee represented there, we get to help say how this goes as it goes forward. And as long as it's broadly scoped so somebody can price it, and the first thing we bring up, they don't say, that's a change to the contract.
Right.
I think we have pretty wide open opportunity. So
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Jim. I think the only thing I would say we would want to make sure is that we do have that flavor of not just a remove and replace. Like, we want you to think, we want you to bring some creativity to it. So because I think you want to draw the right people to respond, right?
Right. And that, I will tell you, that was partly why I had two different conversations as I was doing a little background on this, talking with a landscape architect who would sort of fall more on that creative side, and then talking with a marine engineer, right, who's going to sort of help us figure out the nuts and bolts of how some of these things really need to be designed in a marine environment. And it struck me it's probably a team, and that team needs to have both of those disciplines on it so that they can really figure out some of those more creative and softer side elements, as well as just how do things, function. How does a boat ramp function? How does a pier function? If you're going to do a water feature in a lagoon, how does that function? And how does all of that stuff kind of work?
Right.
And so
right now, RFP doesn't get to that conclusion, Stephen. So maybe that's something you put in there.
Yeah. Like,
Mix of-
deference to people that express that breadth of knowledge and capability.
Or a team, they
Yeah.
subcontract out some of it, or it's a joint venture, or something like that.
yeah, okay.
And kind of along those lines, in the past, I didn't see that like past performance was part of your things that you look at. So having them report on, past projects that we
You
might
sound like you've done source selections.
that would lean towards what we're looking for. And then in the selection weighting, this wasn't really well formed, but just something that speaks to like familiarity with Redondo Beach and what we're looking for based on what we provide. I don't know how that's pretty nuanced, but
beyond sort of the second bullet where we talk about, it says project, but it says familiarity with the project and with City of Redondo Beach policies, ordinance, procedures, capability to handle all aspects of the project, sort of something more than that.
yeah.
I just hate somebody who may be very creative and good for us that hasn't dealt with Redondo before.
Yeah, that part, Stephen, speaks to like just the bureaucratic part, but just to like someone that's done their homework on, like we passed this Measure C and we have, been vocal about not like the mall, and just, I don't know, has done some homework that can have some essence, demonstrate they have some idea of some of the things that the citizens have conveyed they want in a waterfront. I don't know, that was just a thought, but I know that also comes out in the process of after they're selected. So it probably just goes more back to give us examples of what have you done, just to make sure we're not, picking someone that only knows infrastructure or only knows how to put down a bunch of, I don't know, just something that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
So just maybe to help me a little bit, under selection criteria number 1, we talk about qualifications and experience of the staff as demonstrated by their past experience and performance on similar projects. Now, and and that also, we actually, Elizabeth and I had a long conversation about this. We actually changed this when we got a draft RFP. This selection criteria was weighted differently, and we kind of reallocated these percentages so that the very first bullet would carry more weight, which is experience and past performance on quality of similar projects. So we felt like that bullet, and this is just our recommendations, you're free to change it, but that bullet, and then ultimately the overall cost, what was their experience on past projects and how much is this project going to ultimately cost the city, carry more weight than maybe, the accuracy and clarity of their submittal. We want a clear and accurate submittal, but that shouldn't be as important as their experience on past projects, right? So
Right.
We could change the weighting criteria a little bit if you felt like you want even more weight put on their past performance and their experience on similar types of projects. And that's one way to try to do it, so that we get firms that understand that if they're not really, if this isn't really in their wheelhouses, if this isn't stuff they've done before, then they shouldn't be applying for it. We don't want we don't want somebody necessarily, I would assume, who this is their first time writing a waterfront plan or waterfront amenities plan, that when they look at that, they go, wow, geez, a quarter of the scoring criteria is related to experience, and we just don't really have that depth and breadth of experience.
Yeah, I actually think the way you worded it's fine, as long as similar projects, we kind of hit on some of the things that we've said tonight about creativity and, thinking a little outside the box and looking nice and not just remove and replace.
Yeah, so if you add that up, and if you add that to the scope
Up
of
in the top.
that will flow through to say, hey, okay, that's part of
So.
your experience in using those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And possibly, Stephen, if you made something like ability to work a pass-fail, you have 10% more to play with somewhere without taking away from another criteria.
I'm sorry, Jim, explain that to me again.
If you made something like the ability to work upon issuance of the notice to proceed, if you made that
Yes.
pass-fail instead of a percent,
Oh, I
then
see.
you have 10% to allocate somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that it's funny you bring that one up. I laugh about that because when I was in the consulting world, would you ever say you weren't ready to start on the day that P was issued, right?
Mhm.
So you kind of look at that and you go, well, everybody's going to get maximum points on that because everybody's going to say they have enough bandwidth to do the deal. No one's ever going to be honest enough to say, oh my God, my plate is so full. If you give me this job, it's just going to
6 month delay, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I'd put it as pass-fail.
We could do that. And then you want to reallocate that 10%. You want to take part of that and put it on the first bullet.
I think that's where Leslie was going, isn't it, Leslie?
Either that one or the second bullet with,
Policies and ordinances.
well,
How do you measure
yeah, but
that?
speaking to the missing part, I guess it would be the first one.
How do you measure the second one, Stephen?
I think it would probably be, it goes back to, to me, it would be if looks like they've done their homework in terms of reviewing some of the background materials and have woven some of that into their proposal. I'll agree. It's, I feel like the middle, sort of the middle three are the ones you could probably play around with a little bit more. Maybe even middle four. Like I said, I feel the first and the last ones are the most important personally.
Yeah.
We've had this in other RFPs. That's, some of this is a little bit, I'll be honest, some of this is a little bit of the byproduct of the boilerplate. So, we'd have to think about, to us, what does that mean? Well, if they've looked at our policies and our planning documents and they've responded to those appropriately, if they've responded to Measure C appropriately, right? That's an ordinance, and they've at least acknowledged that exists and it's woven into our, you could decide, I don't know, it's important. And that's why I wanted to put this in there so we can have this conversation, because other than the first and the last bullet as staff, I don't really feel too strongly about the middle ones if you all wanted to do something different with those.
Yeah, you could get different in, creativity and sustainability or.
That might go to the point that Commissioner Bauer was trying to make, which is if you are, if you want this amenities plan to, respond in a sustainable manner, which could involve the electric car charging stations, as well as other kinds of sustainable design components, some BMPs, some best management practices in terms of some of the design and how the different pieces fit together. I mean, that certainly could be woven into, it's my caution will be, remember when they submit the proposal, they're not submitting the design, right? So they're just kind of, we've got to be mindful of what is going to come in the work product versus what's going to be in the proposal. So the proposal is largely built around their experience, their understanding of the scope of work and how they would propose their approach to the scope of work, their cost, their individual staff, and their ability to really take this on. If they're able to incorporate into their proposal that concept, then we could use it as a selection criteria or a weighting criteria. I just want to be mindful about design things working their way into their proposal, because they won't go all the way there. They're going to talk about a process more than they're going to talk about a project.
And they'll talk about their approach.
Yes.
To this kind of project.
So if we wanted to change one of the bullets to reflect that, we could. That second bullet, I kind of now rereading it, I kind of agree with Chair Light that maybe that might be a hard one to really measure in terms of their familiarity with the project and the City of Redondo Beach policies, ordinances, and procedures. Maybe that's one you want to modify and have it be more directed at how their proposed approach addresses. I'm working off the top of my head here.
I don't think we want to get to that level, because I could sit here and rewrite the whole document and it'd take us.
I wouldn't remove it, because you don't want to waste part of the 9 months getting them up to speed. I mean, certainly they'll have to get into the details of those documents, but
so you
want them to hit the ground running a little.
So your recommendation would be just to remove that second bullet?
No, I would leave it. I wouldn't remove it.
Okay.
I just asked, in your what we in the federal government call Section L, and your, what they have to write, how you have to have something you evaluate that from, right?
Right.
So I don't know if you want to add a paragraph about, explain your familiarity with. Do you have a page limit? I don't read that in here.
I don't have a page limit. I typically put it in there.
I could write 500 pages in response to this RFP.
Oh, I thought you had 10 pages, no? Okay.
No, 10 copies.
No, it was 10 copies.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I do page limits on, individual sections. So, under the proposal requirements, you could, for each of those sections, put a page limit on there.
That's up to you guys. You guys are going to review it, but open-ended is tough.
Yeah. We'll think about that. That's not a bad idea.
And typically, when I was in the government writing RFPs, we'd put the page count to match your weighting.
Yep.
So. Okay. Anything else, Leslie?
No, thanks.
Thanks. Those are some good input. Everybody's had good ones. I guess we're second time around. Is yours, Roger?
And you do have members of the public, just so you know.
I know. So we'll go these two, then we'll go to members of the public.
Okay.
So Roger.
Thanks. I was going to pile on Commissioner Bauer's comment on electric car chargers. I was thinking about those. That's almost like, street lights and handicap spaces to me now. And I was thinking about that more. A good way to put that may be some mention of LEED certification, LEED, which is more than just buildings. It can be, neighborhoods and areas. So I'd put in a phrase like environmental LEED certification where appropriate, with a general emphasis on environmentally responsible and efficient designs. And that should get you
car chargers and a whole lot more good stuff. If you've walked into modern buildings, you can tell something that was built in the 50s and something that was built recently with LEED design. It's night and day.
So I'm confused at this because usually the developer has to go for LEED certification. You wouldn't LEED certify an amenities plan.
So I'm not quite sure how to put this, but LEED is for more than just buildings. It can be for, areas and campuses.
Right, but this person's not going to be the implementer. It's just a plan. And you typically don't get a plan LEED certified. You get the project LEED
I see
certified.
what you're saying. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's two sections here. There's a section 7 proposal requirements and a section 12 evaluation process. And neither of those, they both mention, beauty and wonderfulness. Neither of them mention, environmental considerations.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would, and I'll recommend maybe against the formal LEED certification process, because then we start to get into arguments. Are we doing silver, gold, platinum? I mean, kind of that whole, that's the whole thing. You can, and I Commissioner Carlson, you can sort of do plans that are LEED certified so that, campuses do it, plans do it. It doesn't have to necessarily be individual buildings. But that LEED certification process just adds another layer of time and complexity to the process. What I think we might want to do, if I'm hearing you all, is just somehow make a statement related to the incorporation of sustainable design elements into the various public amenities. And
There you go.
Maybe they have a conversation in their proposal in terms of how they might do that, how the kinds of things they might do as part of their process to ensure that they've done that. And then we could use that as, I think, which was maybe a little bit of what Commissioner Krazan was talking about. Maybe then that becomes also part of the weighting and scoring criteria is you have it on both sides, right? You include it in your proposal, and then we evaluate the extent to which you've thought about that in terms of your approach to the project. They might want to propose as part of their proposal. I don't know that any of them will, but they might want to propose that they go through some sort of certification effort, or they do some kind of, best management. They might talk about best management practices for stormwater runoff, or for, energy efficient design, or any of those kinds of things that would certainly enhance the overall sustainability of the project itself, or the projects, because it's not just one project, it's a series of projects.
None of which these guys will likely implement.
They won't, but they could. And again, it becomes the question of, and I don't even think we ever had this conversation as part of the let's say the boat ramp design. Are there any particular things that need to be incorporated into the boat ramp design that would enhance the overall sustainability of that project? There may be. Maybe it's the way you treat the washdown stations and the water that comes off the washdown. They will, when we ultimately get to project implementation, I agree, they won't be the ones that do that. Whoever implements the project will do it. The question is just how does that get woven into the overall framework plan? Are we being very overt in the framework plans? And look, as a policy matter, you and the council and everybody else will have to decide how much of that you want. This is your plan. This is the plan that the city is implementing. And so to the extent that, we're really looking at the public realm and the public framework, and a lot of this work is public dollars. And I know Jim keeps trying to make that distinction between what are we doing versus what maybe someone in the private sector does if they take on a portion of the project, like International Boardwalk, or, do some work out in the Redondo Beach Marina areas. They will have a different set of responsibilities that they have to answer to.
Even on the city side,
this is just setting that public framework up so that I think one of the criticisms we got as part of the waterfront process was that we didn't pay enough attention to the public realm and where all the various pieces of the public amenities should be laid out. That should have come first, and then the private conversation comes second. And so I think we're trying to set that table now to say, let's have that public conversation, how we lay out the public components, so that then whenever that time is right to have the conversation about the private piece, it's happening within this framework.
Yeah.
So
My concern is getting too far in the weeds, because the more we drive, the more it's going to cost, the longer it's going to take. If you want to start talking about drainage at the boat ramp, you're going to have to get data on elevations and all of that. And
you will.
And I thought, I mean, I didn't think this was getting down to a 90% design review of the final design of the boat ramp. I thought this was for broad placement and integration of the amenities.
I agree.
And I think the more we get in the weeds, the more it's going to cost and the longer it's going to take. And then we're going to let this contract, the city's going to let a contract for someone to build the boat ramp. They're going to go, well, that's wrong. You know, I can't do that. And then it's going to be a big change process. So having bid projects like this, I fear getting too far in the weeds. So anyway, I guess we'll get to that. So Matt, I'm sorry, Roger, anything else?
That's it. Thanks. I was thinking about expanding beyond car chargers. I think you get where I'm going. You know, I would still throw something about environmental responsibility either in section 7 or section 12. And one structural comment, section 12 has a typo. It should be Roman numeral XII, and it's just Roman numeral I.
Aye.
Thanks.
I clearly failed Roman numeral classes when I failed one of two classes, either my Roman numeral class or my word bulleting class. One of the two, I clearly.
When you're in Rome, this is how you order 5 beers. That's it. Thanks.
That I will remember.
Okay, Matt, and then we're going to go to the public.
Okay, on that side note of Roman numerals, whoever came up with the Super Bowl logo failed class 2 because the trophy made it look like Roman numeral 54 instead of 55. Anyway, Commissioner Light, totally agree with you. I am very much concerned about detailing to at the level we're talking about. If 3 months from now, we've got a response to the RFP and we've got a company we're dealing with, and a year from now, we've actually think about it. What do we want in our hands a year from now? Because that's kind of what we're talking about. We want to know, where's the boat ramp going to go? Where's Seaside Lagoon? What is the footprint? We're really talking about conceptual drawings and a footprint. That's it. The conceptual drawings will have a list of how many boat lanes we're going to have, how many parking spaces is it going to have. But when you get down to the actual construction, we're going to then send out an RFP for the construction of the boat ramp that will detail charging stations, that will detail wash places, and all that will all get discussed all over again. A year from now, if I had in my hands the footprint and the basic layout of Seaside Lagoon, the boat ramp, accommodations for transportation, accommodations for, where is the traffic going to move? How is it going to move? Where's the roadways, the bike lanes, that sort of stuff. I think the interconnectivity is important. But that's what I'm saying. We stick with the priority of 3 or 4 of those amenities, and the rest take a back seat, and you end up with a phase 2 master plan. If 5 years from now, you actually had the boat ramp built, you had your Seaside Lagoon with your hand launch boat, your zero entry beach and whatnot, that would be amazing. That would be an absolutely huge accomplishment, quite frankly, after I've seen for 30 years how slow progress is in any aspect of city government. No insult to any city staff. It's just the nature of the beast. We've got elections coming up. You could potentially have new council members taking over, which suddenly changes the direction. For us to try to bite off more than we can chew in a relatively short period of time is an exercise in futility. And Commissioner Callahan, I'm sure, can attest to that. I think that's what her point is. So keep it focused, keep it simple. conceptual drawings. Where's it going to go? What's the general footprint, the layout? Because everything else is going to get detailed when we send out RFPs for construction. Really, we just want to know what's the best place to put this and how does it impact everything else? And the boat ramp's got to take priority. Everything else is going, we've got to put the boat ramp in the very best location for the boat ramp, and that meets the requirements under Measure C. Seaside Lagoon takes second simply because of the nature. Again, it's got limited places it needs to be. I agree with Commissioner Carlson. We probably need to expand the definition or the scope of Seaside Lagoon to include events so that it's more than just, so we do need to look at how big of an area do we want to dedicate to that. Do we include the zero entry beach there? Do we include the outriggers? Sure. So those are questions to be answered. But a year from now, if you told me those two and you had conceptual drawings of what they looked like and where, fantastic. We're ready to go. We're actually ready to put a shovel in the ground and get bids for construction and move down the road. Anything beyond that, I think, is wishful thinking. If I got those two things, I'd be happy as could be. So that's all I've got to say. So thank you very much.
So let's open it up to the public, Stephen.
Sure. You have Councilmember Nierenheim is here and he would like to talk. So I'm going to click his button. Councilmember Nierenheim, I believe you are live. Feel free to make your public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Proud. Appreciate it. Hello, Arbor Commissioners. It's wonderful to talk to you guys tonight. Great to hear some of this conversation happening. Sorry if it's a little bit of a repeat from what you heard, what you guys are talking about. I want to reiterate, Commissioner Kilroy, I believe exactly what you were just saying regarding phasing and the plans with what we need to do move forward on. First of all, let me just start off with my notes that I started off here with. Moonstone Park. Separate plan, just resurrect the plans that we currently have, update it. Don't worry about the minor duplications that you might or might not have throughout the major parts of the harbor. Like Commissioner Callahan, you said earlier, prevent the runaround that we talked about earlier, recycle those plans, update as needed, and resubmit. The RFP clearly stated that it needs to be a parallel project running, with public input. It's just, we have money sitting there, we got plans, just update it and see where we go from there. And whatever happens there really truly will not impact the rest of the harbor because it's too small of a location. The amenities that you place there are just too small. If you have some minor duplication, that's great, that's fine. With regard to the master planning, I believe that it should kind of be broken up into two phases or two steps. Step one, phase in the boat launch ramp, find a location for that, then deal with the Seaside Lagoon, and then the sports fishing pier. You might want to disagree on whether the Seaside Lagoon or sports fishing pier goes first, but regardless, I think the boat launch ramp should come first. Recycle the old plans and ideas that you have, work from those comments, work from the EIR comments. We have Joe's Crab Shack. If you need to move the Seaside Lagoon around, and of course deal with the sports fishing pier. Regarding the sports fishing pier, real quick, if you look at the EIR comments, there was huge outcry, massive outcry during the EIR comment phase of the waterfront project. And if you notice, when they brought back the revised project, they added that quote view corridor unquote. They took the commercial space that they took out of that view corridor and they put it onto the sports fishing pier. And so the exact square footage of the project ended up being exactly the same. And there was a huge outcry for that. And what's important about sports fishing pier is it gives us huge opportunities, commercial opportunities for things like Catalina Express, dock tie-ups for the tie-ups that we have in the harbor, for the overnight tie-ups. It just gives us a lot of opportunities to develop the harbor and get further access, coastal access, water access, ocean access, land access. Again, I think that if you want to nail down phase one, you can start the exact detailed design work for those three portions. And then you start with the master plan, the phase 2, and you can have a design contest too. So say, for instance, you want to give $5,000 or $10,000 away for the first place design, and then, you know, a second design or second place gets some money. They did that with the, I believe, Chicago Major Park and some other places. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to get ideas from the community as a whole, once you have those three things set in place, to how you want to develop the whole master plan, the harbor with Basin 3, sea level rise, and of course international boardwalk there, and you know, and of course you can't forget the sports the U-shaped pier where Tony's is at, and of course that parking garage, what you want to do with that long term. So those are my comments. Thank you guys very much for taking the time. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for all the work you're putting in here tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Narenheim.
The only other person that I have logged in as a member of the public is Mark Hansen. I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to speak, I can unmute your microphone. You don't have your hand up, so I'm not entirely sure if you wanted to make. I did get
the U-shaped pier.
Now Mark has his hand up. There we go. All right, Mark, there you go. You're unmuted at this point.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hold on. My bad. Hold on. Oh, Mark. Okay, there you go, Mark. Sorry about that.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, great. Hey, first, I just want to compliment everybody for your hard work on this. You know, first, the Harbor Commission work on the strategic plan that really led to this, and to Director Proud and his staff for taking us as far as we've gone here. This is great, and you guys are doing super work tonight. Hey, one quick sidebar on the Mulby Moonstone master plan. I know some of you are new and have never seen it. I've got that in my computer. For those who don't know the history, the King Harbor Boaters formed a subcommittee, and we spent years designing that master plan. And then Sean Guthrie from Marina Cove came in and got very involved cooperatively with us on it. And so I can send that over to any and all of you to take a look at. But that's a really well thought out and nice plan that hopefully we can move forward with. At any rate, obviously I'm super happy about all the public amenities. I've been working on this sort of stuff since 1999. Great to see the potential progress here. So not much for me to say about the amenities. They're great, but as I think you all know, I went through your 5-page strategic plan document, and two things that jumped out at me that really aren't amenities, but affect the amenities, of course, were the consideration of extending the southeastern breakwall and coordinating uses at AES. On the southeastern breakwater, the main thing I want to mention is, if we simply, maybe we could have the consultants we hired do this. We had a study done some years ago. It only cost us $15,000. Moffitt Nichols did it, and it was very helpful. They set pretend waves in it, 3 different azimuths into the harbor. They had 6 pretend sensors in the south turning basin, so it could show us what the resultant wave heights would be for 1, 50, and 100-year events. This could be hugely helpful as we talk about, hey, where do we want to put the boat ramp, sport fishing, the lagoon? We can put the things that, have docks associated with them in the safer places. So whether or not we actually built the southeastern breakwall, well, that study would help us see that. If we look and we say, well, it didn't do that much good, we don't want to blow the money. But if we saw that, wow, it would really protect our stuff, it might lead your strategic plan mentioned coordinating it. Many people have talked over the years about coordinating. And of course, as we say, oh gosh, we've done it piecemeal before, let's not do it piecemeal again. Well, it kind of begs the question on the AES property, are we going to screw up anything working north of or south of Portofino because we forgot to think about something we could do on the AES site. Some years ago, the president of AES contacted me and for one of their proposed projects, he said, Mark, can you get me a survey of what voters would like to see on our property? So I did a survey, typed that up, gave it to him. A lot of it you can imagine. They mentioned brokerages, dealerships, chandleries, tackle shops, dive shops. None of these are amenities. There's just lease people we could try to bring in. But the one real live facility they said is, hey, how about boat storage over there? So that's been hanging out there as an idea for a long time. I'll mention to you that the very same paragraph that the Coastal Commission used to order us to have the boat ramp, it's that same paragraph that says you're supposed to have boat storage. So on any given Tuesday, the Coastal Commission could come in and say, hey, you're supposed to have a boat ramp also. It's also just a basic smart idea for us. Much better to have a nearby or adjacent boat ramp than have everybody driving through town. Very recently at Todd Lowenstein's community meeting, he mentioned the possibility that, well, we either restore the current lagoon or potentially build a new water park at AES, which he said could tie in well with the anticipated park facilities over there. That was the first I'd heard of that, but boy, it certainly sounded intriguing to me. The Seaside Lagoon is not a coastal dependent, use anymore, of course, without the warm water going through it. In fact, it'd be better probably a quarter mile inland where it's warmer. But of course, with that immediately led me to think about, well, wow, if we put the lagoon in a water park, whatever we want to call it, over at the AES site, along with some big 25-acre park space, that would potentially open some space up immediately adjacent to the boat ramp to have some boat storage. So that's a really compelling reason for us to think a little bit about the AES property in this discussion. I want to remind you, just recently, the GPAC, one of the committee members, brought up the fact that they were told AES is not in their jurisdiction. Of course, AES is theoretically not in your jurisdiction. There was going to be an AES committee a few years ago, and they went really far along on this, and we're coming up with 17 different categories of people that were going to serve on it. Somehow that got stalled. So it's kind of interesting right now. Nobody's in charge of talking about the AES property. It wasn't given the GPAC. It's not given to you. It's not given, and that committee was never formed. So I would say Harbor Commission, would be great folks to kind of talk about that, if for no other reason, to talk about the potential location of some boat storage. Anyway, hope those are helpful comments, and great work on all you're doing.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Let's see, is anybody else out there, Stephen?
I don't have anybody else in our public comment section on our Zoom call. Let me just double check to make sure we haven't received any
emails or electronic comments?
Yeah, e-comments or emails. I don't see any e-comments. And then let me just check our mailbox here. I think Mark did send me an email, but I believe he covered both of those items in his public comments. So that's all we have on public comment on that item.
Okay, Roger, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry to go a third time. I've been trying to keep notes here, and I may have a summary of changes. I don't know if that's an action or what's appropriate there. I had one question first. I was looking at section 3, item D, which has the list of amenities for the plan, and design and costing of replacement Basin 3 docks is in there. And believe me, I understand it needs to be done. But that seems like a call to a marine contractor to, order some new floats and some new Trex lumber. Does it belong in here that turns into something for a couple of years? I'm wondering what your thinking is there. It could be a different design or layout of the basin.
Well, I think that would be the question. Now, when we went through the the waterfront planning effort, there was some reconfiguration that was proposed. Ultimately, the slip counts ended up staying the same as what it was. It would probably open a bigger conversation if there was a desire to see that slip configuration change. It's a possible conversation to be had. You could either do a like for like replacement and just call it good, in which case you're correct. We call up somebody, we say, here's how many of 25 footers we got, 30 footers, 40 footers. Give us some estimates on what it would cost to replace it. Engage in a conversation as to whether you want to have some kind of a redesign of that dock configuration itself. It's an interesting conversation in the sense that it may relate. This is where I think some of these things relate to other issues. The sport fishing pier could be the home for the sport fishing and excursion operations. Those operations are currently working out of Basin 3. I don't know if there's any adjustments to the physical components that would be necessary in one location or the other. So that's kind of why it's in there. I agree with you. If we just want to do a like for like, if that's the, sort of the move, it's not much, there's not a whole lot of work there to be done. If there's a sense that you want to have a little bigger conversation around the basin, and is there something we want to do to ultimately reconfigure it in some way that maybe enhances the public's use of the space? I don't know what that is. I'm just throwing ideas out.
Well, just one example, if we put the boat ramp at Mole C, then you have where the hoist is today that you can repurpose.
You could do that too.
Dock, I'm not pretending what it could be, but
Right.
it doesn't. But we do need to be mindful that our local coastal plan says that we can't reduce slips.
Right. But to your point, if you were to move the hoist out and you had that whole wall there, could you do a few more slips? Maybe yes, maybe you got to kind of lay it out and see.
Super long dinghy dock, or I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Right. So
I think that's why that's in there. It may not be the biggest, the biggest ticket item and require the most, sort of design thought, but it certainly is something that has been on our radar screen in particular, because as I mentioned earlier, we're having some real issues in terms of maintenance of those facilities, and we need to do something sooner rather than later in terms of fixing those.
I just want to make sure we keep it consistent with the level of detail for the other.
Yeah.
And
maybe we, maybe the thing to do would be to take out, the costing for the moment in terms of this, and just say the layout for replacement of Basin 3 docks or something like that.
So what I would
There's a
propose
desire.
doing there is deleting that bullet, but in the previous bullet, say a plan for the installation of an enhanced waterfront promenade and Basin 3 layout that connects Mole C to the Horseshoe Pier. Because, that previous bullet, which talks about, waterfront promenades and flooding of the area, that captures everything else you were just talking about, and the design and costing of the basement, the docks coming right after it seems like let's order some 25 footers and some 40 footers.
Yeah. Okay. And anything else, Roger?
So I've been keeping notes, and I have a proposed list of changes. I don't know if this is we're editing the document live, or if this is a motion, but I'll read you what I have.
Let me preempt you a second, if you don't mind, Roger.
Sure.
So first off, I want to get an agreement before we go into the details. Are we in agreement that this shouldn't be an in the weeds design? That we need to get something that's doable in 6 months? I know. Is anybody opposed to that? And that's not, I'm just taking a straw man. This isn't a formal vote of the commission. I'm just taking the temperature here. Steve, I don't see any.
I agree.
Anybody dissenting that this should be a high-level document? Second, I'd like to ask Steve and Elizabeth, have you guys do you have these notes jotted down as we gave them to you?
Yeah, I mean, I know Elizabeth's been taking notes, and I've been trying to listen and take notes as well. So yeah, we've got, is probably between us, when we sit back down, we'd be able to, figure out what the intent was.
My fear is if we wordsmith it here, we're going to be another 2 hours on it, and so I think what I'd like to bounce off Roger, since I'm not trying to take the floor from you, but maybe a motion where we appoint someone like you. It shouldn't be me, because I have my ideas. I think someone else should work maybe with Stephen and Elizabeth to make sure that our intent is captured, rather than sit here and wordsmith it for the next couple hours.
So I don't want to wordsmith this for the next couple hours, but I do want to try to capture our intent because, even what I said varied a lot. And I just have a couple sentences, which I would like to propose, which I'd like to, get out as attempting to capture our intent. So let me give this a try and see where it goes. So the intent, I think I heard, the first one is pretty specific, unfortunately, saying, that one title should be collaborate with working group rather than establish a working group. And then in section D of item 3, where we have a list of amenities, I think that we should add an educational element with proximity to ocean for possible aquarium elements or fish hatchery. That gets us sea lab, white sea bass grow out, potentially other things. I would add to the sentence on Seaside Lagoon, a plan for future use, design, and layout of Seaside Lagoon, including public event space. I'd add a second sentence or a second bullet, consideration of larger public event space outside of Seaside Lagoon. I would add another bullet, space for additional amenities, area attractions, and public art. And then the final change I would make is modifying the timeline, that one thing we discussed, and make it 9 months. And that's my summary of everything I heard tonight, trying to keep it from getting in the weeds.
So
I probably missed a few things.
So I'm in agreement with those things, but there's other things people said, like priorities versus, and I'm just afraid if we get into wordsmithing it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, I understand.
Because I've got stuff that I wrote down. I'm not sure how to capture it, so to try to rewrite it right here. So and you guys can vote this down if you don't like it. So I'd like to make a motion that we appoint one of us, not me, to work with Stephen Proud and Elizabeth to finalize this to go to the council. Is there a second on that, or do you guys want to sit here and wordsmith it? I think Vicky, you seconded it. You're on mute.
Yeah, I second.
Is there any contrarian opinion?
I don't have a contrary opinion. I agree mostly with the way you're talking about not getting into the weeds and all that. Like I said, conceptual drawings. I'm just worried that, and this will probably come out when we have meetings with whoever gets the RFP, but I'm concerned that we're asking them to put too many amenities into a designated area. I think at some point we need to make, and we can do this as part of our subcommittees, I guess, but the educational center, as an example, does not have to go in between Portofino Way and the International Boardwalk, just as an example. Seaside Lagoon, and I keep hammering on this, but Seaside Lagoon and the boat ramp are the two things that have to go in there. And everything else should take a back seat to that.
Yep.
That's my opinion. And I just think that needs to be, but I mean, that can happen moving forward. That doesn't have to be part of the RFP.
But I think the RFP can list address whether you have, I like the way they did the sport fishing pier because it says if any. And you're right. The two things that have to be in there per our zoning and per the Coastal Commission is the boat ramps required by the Coastal Commission and Measure C or actually Measure G required it too. And the Seaside Lagoon is part of Measure C. So those are the two mandatory. The rest, I think it's good to list them to, and Moonstone Park, I think we would want to because the council wants to do that separately. So, but the rest, I think we could list them as to get the scope in so the respondent understands the scope to just address them. It doesn't have to be in, just has to be considered by the. But I'd like to pull the thread on this. Before I call a vote on this, I see Vicky, you've got your hand up. Roger, you got your hand up. I'd also like to see who you guys think would be the best to represent this. So with that, Vicky, go ahead.
I was going to nominate Roger since he's had more outlines and input this evening. I think his verbiage is very good. I believe he has the time, which is important. And I think he would be a good representative for the Harbor Commission.
So is that a friendly amendment to my motion?
It is.
I second that. I accept your friendly amendment. Roger, are you done, Vicky? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, Roger.
So what I was going to say before Vicky spoke, and now I'm really going to say it is, if Jim, you said one person should go do this. First of all, I'm uncomfortable with it being only one. And exactly what I was going to say is, if I were the person nominated, I wouldn't know what to do with this. I would go and watch this meeting over and over again and try to capture all the comments. And I don't know what's in and what's out, because there have been, so many comments over the last couple hours. I would be very uncomfortable unilaterally trying to sift through it all without getting a little better sense of the meeting. And we have, 2 or 3 members who have said a little less, Commissioner Walters and Commissioner Bauer, and they had more details, and I'm concerned we're not, capturing their input or steamrolling them.
What if we add a person and add maybe Commissioner Walters or Commissioner Krazan?
But I'm still not comfortable with anyone taking this whole meeting and boiling it down into comments.
So you want them to bring it back to the commission again?
No, I'd rather not, but I would like to get, some sense of what's in and what's out. I mean, you took a straw poll on the level of detail we're trying to get to here, and it's guidance, but it's not. I wouldn't really know what to do with that.
Chair Light. So, Commissioner Carlson did have some, in terms of trying to distill some of the thoughts for tonight. It didn't make it into your motion. The question is maybe to try to start to understand those things that, if we are going to make modifications to the scope, do you want to at least get the temperature of the commission on some of the, and I wasn't writing fast enough, Commissioner Carlson. I think I got three of the four, or 4 of the 5. But I think you were capturing some of the comments, and I didn't, the public event space, whether it be in the lagoon, outside the lagoon. I think for me, where I heard, and this may have been the comment that I didn't quite get written down, is there was a fair amount of conversation about some kind of a beautification, some kind of a thematic component to this plan that, is definitely a much softer exercise than just figuring out where we put the boat ramp and where we put the lagoon. It sort of speaks to a broader sense of place, if you will, for the harbor itself, or at least that portion of the harbor. And it come up 2 or 3 times. And if that's something,
so to me, you've captured, what you've heard that from people, and you can take a shot at writing that in. I've got a list of probably 30 things that I wrote down from people talking. To sit here and go through each of them, we're going to be here all night, which we're already at 8:48.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that. I actually was thinking maybe we hear Commissioner Carlson go through his laundry list one more time and just at least get a sense if there's some consensus that those things should be added, so we at least start to understand. I like that you all are appreciating how hard our job is to listen to all of you and then try to put it into a document. So it would be helpful to get a little sense of if some of those things are important enough that you all feel like they ought to be included. I think that's where, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that may be where Commissioner Carlson is going, which is, if we just walk away and we distill it all down, then I feel like I needed to come back to you and say, did we capture kind of the right level of in the weeds or not in the weeds? And did we sort of feel like we at least addressed a lot of your concerns?
Yeah, I just think perfection is the enemy of good enough, and we want to
Agreed. Agreed.
And
I love that phrase.
There's people I trust on this commission, or we wouldn't be here. So I'd like
Right.
to empower some folks to actually do that versus having to spell everything out right here. But I mean, I can conduct us through a straw man poll. So the first thing, you got the establish versus collaborate. Does anybody agree with that? As collaborate with the subcommittee? Anybody disagree with that? Okay. The second, I mean, there's just a whole laundry list. There's aquarium. Is that in or out?
Well, I think what I would say is, to the point that Commissioner Carlson was making, is he was, I think, trying to address the question of, just broader question of, should we have an education component? And, you know, from our perspective, you're really, to go back to what you were saying, is are we just going to try to designate a location? We won't be able to decide whether it's an aquarium, a museum, you know, a visitor attraction, as Commissioner Walter suggested. But should there be a space preserved for that type of use? To maybe Commissioner.
Marine biology.
Yeah, you know, do we just want to identify a location for that use? I agree. It doesn't necessarily have to be south of Harbor Drive. It could be somewhere in the broader harbor area. But
So let's tackle that first. There's been several comments right now. We've been focusing on Molby or between Portofino Way and Quality Seafood. Do we want to, I think we have to open that up for some of these other discussions.
We have to open what up for other discussions? I'm not sure what you mean. The area?
Well, if we're going to put an education facility, it may not be in the center cal, between Portofino Way and Quality Seafood, and it may not be on Molby.
Totally agree, which is why I think from a priority point of view, it's not.
And I agree. I'm just trying to get through one thing at a time. So first was the scope from a distance across the harbor. Do we have scope to go across the broader harbor for some of this, or do we want to contain it? And that's why I kind of didn't want to get to this, because it's going to be a long discussion with hands up.
We're going to be here all night.
Yeah,
Contain it.
I wanted to empower some folks to make some decisions on our behalf. And if we get pissed off at them, we can call them up and say, you screwed up. But I'd rather get this going than sit here for 3 more hours.
No, but I think just mentioning it, though, that we would like that element to be considered, or for instance, the sustainability concept as well.
The more stuff you throw in, the longer it's going to take and the more problems there's going to be. We're going to be out in the weeds.
Right, but if you don't list, I mean, how are you ever going to end
That's
up
why we
with
have
an educational?
That's why we have a subcommittee that's helping steer them. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mind giving a laundry list of things potentially we could put in so they kind of scope it. But I agree with Matt, the 2 mandatory things are Seaside Lagoon and the boat ramp. And I think because of what Councilman Narenheim is talking about, we have to assume that Molby Moonstone Park is part of it, the master plan. And the rest is a list of things that we could consider.
Right.
And I honestly think we should. I think it behooves us to, and we can talk this in the subcommittee. That's why I hate to get in the weeds here. Is we should place the sport fishing pier and leave it up to the council whether they leave it out or put it in. Because if we leave it out and they say no, I want it back, then it may screw up the things that we're trying to do. But that, to me, that's what the subcommittee will do, and the consultant, rather than us try to pre-engineer it in an RFP. So
agree. And to your comments, I would just make 2 short comments. Planning outside of areas that we control is going to be very difficult. If the goal of this is to get to implementation, then if we're not focused on Molby and the area sort of south of Portofino Way, where the city controls, 90% of the leasehold area down there, it is probably not going to be very beneficial, because we just don't have the ability to implement the project if it's anywhere else. The C-Lab project isn't controlled by the city. AES isn't controlled by the city. We don't have the ability to implement any kind of public improvement in those zones. So I think you would be wise to think about just Molby and the area kind of south of Portofino Way, just as my first comment. And then my only other comment would be, while I'm supportive of the idea of kind of getting the big pieces in place, the only thing I would add is that if there are other things you want on the list, you just want to make sure that someone has thought about where those might go in the plan, so that we haven't precluded those down the road more than anything, you know.
Is there anything to preclude us, if we put an appointee on here, for us individually to email the person to make sure our pet thing gets in there?
You know, I'm a little concerned about that just from a Brown Act perspective. It's kind of like you're all communicating outside of this.
No, I'm not saying CC everybody, but just one person go to Roger.
Or how about just send it to Stephen Proud?
Yeah, I would feel much better if you sent it to me.
Yeah, so let's do that. Everybody get that thing and get it into Stephen. And I'd prefer we pick one. I don't care if it's two people to sit there and just help Stephen make sure that it's captured. You know, kind of give it the blessing that the commission didn't just throw it over to him and let it go to the wind, but that we had a double. You know, we had our own check and balance on that. So, or however you want to call it, help to Director Proud and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we got three hands. This is what I was trying. Okay.
So Commissioner Light, can I offer one more thought to you? Just, I don't want to make it any more complicated than it already is. But if I'm looking at my calendar, clearly this won't be on the city council agenda for next Tuesday night. The March 2nd meeting of the city council will be canceled because of the election, which means the next city council meeting would be March 9th. You very well could have this come back on March 8th, and then it could go to the city council, say on, the 16th. You're not, by having it come back to you, I don't think you're expanding the window.
Okay, I did not know that. So let's just.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it till just now when I was realizing that March 2nd meeting was going to be canceled.
Would it help you to have someone work with you in the meantime to get?
Yeah,
this?
I mean, I'd love to have, and whoever that may be, whether that's Commissioner Carlson or anyone else, just, we take another cut at it. They could be a set of eyes to look at that draft before it comes back to the Harbor Commission to make sure they feel like it really represents your position. It's almost then at that point, we're bringing it back to you almost kind of for a confirmation that we got it, right?
Yeah.
And then.
So I'm withdrawing my initial motion, and we'll take comments here real quick. Okay, Roger?
I may be out of order here, but I would like to make another motion at some point. If there's other general discussion ahead of that, happy to hear
Okay,
it.
let's go to Steve, and then I'll come back to you for your motion. Okay, Steve?
Well, I was just going to volunteer to help Roger if you're going to proceed. So if you're going to withdraw your motion, I'll withdraw my comment. So
Okay. Leslie?
Just on the master or the geography, I think I understand what you're saying, Stephen, if we can't design something on property we don't oversee, but I think we should couch it as master plan of the area, show them just in a map, in an addendum, distinctively the areas where you want the project, but that you don't want to preclude partnerships. So like the bike path, you make a comment about the bike path there. You don't want to shut down an opportunity for them to suggest a partnership with other leaseholds to improve that amenity, or some of the other ideas that we've talked about.
Anything else, Leslie?
No.
Okay, Roger, back to you.
So let me try a motion, and I hope this doesn't lead into 2 hours of discussion. But I would like to try to clean up Section D with a simple motion and see if we can close this and hand it off to Director Proud tonight, recognizing that we do have another Harbor Commission meeting, and then it goes to the City Council, and they can, feel free to change this as much as they want. So here's my motion. We amend and edit the draft RFP as follows. We make the functional change to the title and say collaborate with working group rather than establish. We make a second change where we modify the timeline from 12 months to 9 months. And then within the list of amenities plan in Section D, we delete the line on Basin 3 docks. We add a note on modifying Basin 3 with the enhanced waterfront promenade. So a plan for the installation of enhanced waterfront promenade and Basin 3 that connects Mole Sea to Horseshoe Pier, on and on. On Seaside Lagoon, on that bullet, we add the element including public event space and consideration of larger public event spaces. And then we add another bullet, consideration of additional amenities, area attractions, and public art. That makes it softer and optional. And the final thing I would add is consideration of an educational element with proximity to ocean for possible aquarium elements or fish hatchery. And that's the end of my motion. I would happily entertain a few additions to section D as, friendly amendments to that motion. And I just want to say as a comment, the reason I would put the educational element in this area, even though it's very dense, even though it's, 15 pounds of educational elements in a 5-pound bag, I would put it in there rather than down at Moonstone and the other basins, because that's where the foot traffic is, and that's where the clean, fresh water is for the hatchery. If you hide that educational element, in the back of the harbor, hey, the old waterfront education building was very useful, would love to have it back, but it occupies a really different role when it's hidden away and not, part of the kind of downtown area. So that's my motion. I would happily entertain, a couple of additions if there's something I've missed, but my intent is to try to limit discussion to a couple items in section D. May not be possible, but I wanted to try it once.
You guys are killing me. Steve?
I'll make a second.
Okay, Steve?
I withdraw my hand.
Leslie? Vicky?
I really have a problem with the word aquarium. Aquariums are outrageously expensive to design, install, and run. If we could find any other terminology to put in there, I would approve it. But aquariums, we don't need an aquarium. We've got one in Manhattan. An aquarium, like the Pacific Ocean Aquarium down in Long Beach, on a smaller basis, would cost the city an outrageous amount to take care of. And I think that's going to be a real boggler.
I think if you wanted to leave a holding spot for it or have it something under consideration, you just leave it as broad as visitor attraction.
I think visitor attraction is a much better idea.
That's what I said, marine biology, because that could be anything, just native fauna, birds, fish, whatever.
Well, yeah, but then you're still saying we're going to implement it and put a marine biologist there to answer questions.
That's all these have to be in. It's that they have to be considered by the consultant. Right. Other than and that's where I don't get, the wording's not right yet. And that's where I don't want to wordsmith this tonight, because there's a lot of nuances and detail.
I'm finished.
Well, okay, if we can, and maybe this isn't a motion anymore, maybe it's a discussion. If we can agree that discussion of these bullet points is what we want to capture, I'm comfortable with a subcommittee, maybe even me, working on this. What I would propose doing then is deleting the line on educational facility and just adding that to the line consideration of additional amenities with educational elements, area attractions, and public art.
Yeah, good.
But I'm really uncomfortable trying to capture the last 2 or 3 hours of discussion, which covered many levels of detail, and trying to bring that back, because it's just punting the 4-hour meeting to next month, the night before the council meeting.
Well, no, if you captured 90% of it and we had 10% to wordsmith, it would cut down a lot. I mean, if you don't want to do it, I will volunteer to do it. I've taken a lot of notes here, but I'm very passionate on this. I don't mind. Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to ask, does it not make sense that we would like the proposal to at least take into account sustainability issues?
See, that's where we're going to keep going around. We had boardwalk facelift, electronic sign, electrical charging infrastructure. We had beautification. We had cultural item. And I mean, we could go through this and go round and round all night. I'd rather.
No, but I'm just suggesting just a single word somewhere in their sustainability, but yeah.
Yeah. Sustainability was one. Do we want to put in signage?
Well, no,
Electronic.
I think the electric signage, I mean, I don't know. What I don't want to see happen is that, that it doesn't ever get considered down the road, but I don't think we need to get too specific. I don't want to get down to the weeds. Sustainability is a very, it's the idea of trying to make sure that there's a focus on this being green.
Yep.
That. If you guys don't, I'm cool with it. Not.
So we have a motion and a second. We had a lot of words talking. I'm not sure we captured those, but what do we want to vote? I'm not sure what is in and out again, but we got a prioritization issue as well.
Could I suggest that, Roger, you just reread the section of your motion that dealt with aquariums, attractions, etc., just to memorialize any changes you have made now to that?
Okay, how about this? How about if I read all the bullets under section D? That's like 6 sentences.
Fair enough.
Okay, so the bullet should be the location, design, and design of the public boat launch facility and required support parking. No change there. The location and programmatic elements of a replacement sport fishing pier, if any. No changes there. A plan for the future use, design, and layout of Seaside Lagoon, including public event space. Next one is a plan for the installation of an enhanced waterfront promenade and Basin 3 that connects Mole C to the Horseshoe Pier and specifically identifies ways to improve the pedestrian experience along the International Boardwalk and reduce flooding that occurs along the boardwalk during high tides. The next bullet, design and costing of replacement Basin 3 docks, I would delete. Location and design of a dinghy dock to serve the harbor mooring field, I would keep that. Upgrades to the city's personal watercraft hand launching facility, including consideration of a zero depth launch option, keep it, no change. And then I would add the bullet, consideration of a larger public event space outside of Seaside Lagoon. Then I would add the bullet, consideration of additional amenities, including educational elements, area attractions, and public art. And then I would add the final bullet, consideration of sustainability and environmental considerations within designs.
So I don't have any problem with that as an RFP, keeping in mind that as we work with whoever is awarded the RFP, we're going to be fine-tuning the priority of some of these items. And, we're really going to get to the details. This certainly is broad enough and lists everything that might possibly go into the area we're considering. So I'll second the motion.
One of my intents in there was to have a soft word like consideration on everything except boat launch and Seaside Lagoon.
Exactly.
And Moonstone Park.
Moonstone Park is not mentioned in here.
Well, the Moleby master plan.
Moonstone Park is mentioned in the next paragraph, and there are existing plans.
Okay, so we're only doing
these bullets.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So we have a motion and a second. So we call for a vote.
So wait. You left out your broader event space, which you had in there previously.
No, he had it in there.
He did that.
It's in there.
Okay, and you missed sustainability?
That was the last one. I didn't use the word sustainability. I stumbled over the word. I said responsible and environmental.
And somewhere we talked about, I don't know, creativity and connectivity. So
I had consideration of additional amenities, area attractions, and public art.
And
Well, the connectivity to some extent was listed on the promenade.
Yeah.
I agree. It didn't talk about connectivity. I don't know, bike path, cars and transportation, but he did list the promenade and connecting International Boardwalk to the Horseshoe Pier.
And
Okay.
I would say that bullet, which I hadn't really focused on before, I actually think the phrase identifies ways to improve the pedestrian experience along the International Boardwalk can be taken a lot of ways, including this notion of beautification or upgrading, or you're really just trying to improve that experience. So that language is kind of in there. I think Commissioner Carlson left it in there. And I think that can, give you a little bit of wiggle room as Commissioner Kilroy said, when you have the subcommittee getting together and you're really getting into the nuts and bolts about what's being prioritized and kind of how you're starting to get to that 60% plan that you suggested. I think that's where you're going to flesh some more of this out in terms of what some of that detail really means with the consulting.
Okay.
It's enough for them to put their proposal together.
In V, we wanted 9 months versus 12 months. I don't know if you captured that in your.
Yeah, well, so let me just double check with you. So what I thought I heard the first time we had that conversation was that we should just change where it says 6 months to say 9 months, but still have the whole framework be 12 months, recognizing the last 3 months are for public hearings.
Oh, that's not what I thought the opposite.
Okay, so if you're now saying change the number 12 to 9 and leave the rest of the paragraph the same, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was recommending. And then the other piece was the, what was the other piece now?
Collaboration versus,
Yeah, you got that. Oh, expediting Moonstone Park. You have accelerating it. You have that it's separate, but you don't instill the notion that it should be faster.
Is that within this RFP or is that something we do separately? I confess I haven't understood that.
So Nils,
well,
Councilman Narenheim, and I believe backed by Lowenstein and Mayor Brand wanted an easy, quick win. And so they suggested, and I agree with it, to have a separate effort, which I think is in here, or a parallel effort of getting through not Moonstone Park, but Mulby Master Plan quicker, because it is, I mean, that went through, as Mark was saying, years of review to get to where it's at. So it's pick it up, dust it off, see if there's anything else we need to change on it and update based on outrigger canoes and all that kind of stuff, and get it in quickly versus waiting 9 months for something
which is different to me than tagging it into a 12-month RFP process.
Yeah, and the conversation recall at the council was, are we going to have two separate RFPs? And everybody said, no, we don't want to do that. Let's have one RFP, one team, one group, and they just have two different efforts that are happening at the same time. And I think we could come up with an easy fix, quite honestly, to just add a sentence to that last item in letter D, where we talk about Moonstone Park being its own separate effort. We could just add a sentence on something along the lines of, the expectation is that given the level of work already completed, that this process could be expedited in a manner more quickly than the remainder of the public amendment.
Yeah, and that lets it up to them and their project schedule to.
Yeah, and then they would have that. You're just signaling to them, hey, we've got some work already done. We think this can be done quicker, and it needs to be on its own kind of separate parallel track.
Isn't that sentence already in there?
It's in your staff report. I don't know if it's in the RFP.
In addition, the RFP says, in addition, the plan should address the design for Moonstone Park and Mulby. It is anticipated that this planning effort will occur on a separate but parallel track.
Right.
And will address the overall design of the park, accommodations for outrigger clubs that operate from the mole, opportunities for dry mat, stack-up boat storage, and use of the mole for special events.
What it does is that's expedited.
Correct. That's the concept but that's easy enough to add.
Yep.
Yeah, a separate milestone deliverable for that. They propose in their schedule when they deliver that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure that's a motion, but we got.
Is that a friendly amendment to Commissioner Carlson's motion?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
I'm trying to help you keep track of who's made what motions and what's going in there. But I think we have, and just for the record, I think Commissioner Carlson made the motion. I know, Matt, you said you wanted to second it, but I actually think Commissioner Callahan had seconded it. Am I wrong?
Fine with me. Doesn't matter.
Okay. I've lost a little track on.
I think Matt seconded it last.
Okay. That we can, whoever, I just want to make sure the record reflects it, because when I get the minutes, it'll say Commissioner.
Okay.
Motion
Are there
second.
any other recommended changes? I think we can forego having a separate subcommittee or anything like that. It's going to come back to us. We basically wordsmithed it to death. So, any other discussion?
Can I ask
Looks like
one last question? So you said we're not going to have a separate subcommittee, but we had this notion that maybe one or two people, after we've taken a crack at it before it comes back to you, maybe just proof it for us or give it a quick read and see if they think we've captured it.
let's tackle that as a separate motion. Let's get this one done.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Is anybody opposed to all that stuff we just did in a motion? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, now I will entertain a motion on a separate subcommittee or person to review it after Director Proud and Elizabeth and whomever else, if the city's going to draft this, comes up with a draft. Does anybody want to make that motion?
Does anybody want to volunteer?
Well,
I'll volunteer. I don't care.
my
I
thing
mean, I
is,
care. I care.
since Roger made most of the suggestions, wouldn't he be the most logical person?
Previously, you've heard from two people. I think Commissioner Carlson and Commissioner Walters.
And Walters, why don't they do it together?
They seemed like they were both amenable to.
Is that your motion, Vicky?
They don't have to do
Yeah,
any
my
drafting.
motion- Because Roger's uncomfortable doing it alone and Steve is happy to do it. I think they'd work well together. So my motion is that Roger Carlson and Steve Walters work together.
Do you guys both agree to that?
Now that we've had the previous motion, I definitely do, because I feel that my scope in a subcommittee is limited to just like, cleaning up the grammar
Yep.
of
Okay.
all the yammering
I got
I
it.
just did.
Steve?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I'll
should we have,
And we can take a third too, if anyone's interested.
I'll second it. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, do you have the resolution, Stephen, or do I need to?
Oh, I think we've got it.
Okay. Any other discussion or motions or anything else? Oh, so I do have a question. I think since we have another meeting, I don't think we have to do it tonight. Originally, I was going to suggest we appoint the subcommittees, but I think we can do that at the next meeting. Actually, we could do it, how long do you think the RFP, you got to go to the city, then it's going to be a while till you get responses back and you got to evaluate them. So at some point, if you want to agendize it, but, or whether we just bring it up next time we talk about this, but I would like to get the subcommittees defined.
Yeah, you have a little bit of time, right? So we're going to, if we bring this back to you on March 8th, and then what I'd really like to do is essentially have my staff report for the city council drafted. So this actually would be on their March 16th agenda, right? So the very next week, it won't go the next night because we can't do that, but it would go the following week, the 16th.
Okay.
And really that would have probably been the night it would have gone anyway, if you'd approved it tonight, just because of the election delay, et cetera. If the council approves it that night, I have two open questions. One is, are they going to be able to take the action that night to actually, are they just to fund the RFP? Because you may have remember when I did the PowerPoint presentation, I said they were going to have to move some money from the capital improvement plan over to our operational budget. I assume they can do that night and they don't have to wait to do that. If they can do that, then we should be ready to greenlight getting this out on the street pretty quick. Typical response times for the city are probably 30 days. We could talk about whether we can make it 21 days, it probably depends.
I'd like to take advantage of it being agendized. So if we agendize it for the next meeting to go over your results, can we also add,
For the
pick
subcommittee? Sure.
And we can always put it off if we don't want to do it then,
Yeah.
but at least agendize it so we can talk about it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Okay, that was fun.
All right.
But I do want to get out, I really appreciate the effort of putting together a draft RFP because it would have been, as much time as it took to wordsmith it here, would have been much longer to give you some direction tonight and then have you come back. And so I really appreciate it. And it did give us a good straw man to shoot out. It was a good effort getting that out. So
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We never wanted to represent that we thought we got it right. So we appreciate all the input on kind of crafting this. And I think we'll have a product.
It's more than I was expecting. I was expecting you to just ask us for a process and a scope, which is kind of what the council directed us. And I think we leapfrogged forward, and anything we can do to accelerate this, I'm all for. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Sounds great.
Okay, my agenda went blank. I think what are we at?
We're at director's report, which given the time you've spent on that item, I will intentionally try to keep very brief. So as I always do, I kind of remind you of some of the things that's already gone to the city council. Obviously on January 12th, the public amenities plan went to them and they referred it to you. And then on January 19th, we had a small lease with the cancer support community. They're staying at Pier Plaza. They're just relocating to a smaller space as a result of COVID. And then we did a small contract amendment with Cosmon Associates. Upcoming on the city council agendas, we have a few leasing items we have an amendment to the master lease with Bob Resnick. And then a series of 4 smaller subleases. On our miscellaneous and follow-up items, we're really happy that outdoor dining is back, and that the restaurants on the pier and down in Riviera Village and other locations within the city now have that opportunity to do outdoor dining. So that's a good thing for us. We're still working through, as you can imagine, rent deferrals that we get requests for on a case-by-case basis. We're still continuing to work on repayment plans with the tenants. That will continue on in the months ahead as we work our way out of the pandemic. I did allude to this earlier. The city did submit our response, changing topics. We did submit our response to the comments from the Army Corps that were received by the Army Corps of Engineers. So the Army Corps gets everyone's comments. They ship some of those back to the city. The city responds to those comments and says those responses back to the Army Corps. I will send a copy of the response to comments to you in an email, just so you have that response to comments to you. I think as we noted at the last meeting, it would have been odd to have you comment on the response to comments, given that you made comments. But we can at least give you the response that the consultant team and the public works put together to respond to those things. And then really the last thing that I wanted to report on in the director's report, and we could revisit this next month if you have any questions about it, was I believe Commissioner Callahan has been asking us to give you an update on where we are on occupancy levels for the various leaseholds that we have out at the pier. I'll go through them individually. Maybe I'll start out just overall in the areas that we control, and we're talking about Pier Plaza, International Boardwalk, Redondo Beach Marina, and Fisherman's Wharf area. We have a 39% vacancy rate in those areas. So our total square footage for those 4 areas is a little under 170,000 square feet, and we have about 66,000 square feet that's vacant right now. That's 39%. By and large, the number that's driving that to be such a big number is the Fun Factory space. So the Fun Factory space in and of itself is 29,360 square feet. So of the 65,000 feet that's vacant, nearly 50% of that is made up of the Fun Factory itself. So up at Pier Plaza, we're 29% vacant. It's about 19,000 square feet that's vacant. International Boardwalk, we're at 66% vacancy. but that's because of the Fun Factory space. We have 31,700 square feet vacant, but the Fun Factory makes up 29,300 of it. So if you pulled the Fun Factory out, we'd really only be a couple of thousand square feet of vacancy on the International Boardwalk.
When you say Fun Factory, do you include that restaurant that was attached?
Yeah, that whole space. The Redondo Fisherman's Cove leasehold.
Okay.
Made up of the Fun Fish Market, and it was made up of the Fun Factory itself. So that area right there. In the Redondo Beach Marina, we have 14,900 square feet vacant. That's about 36% vacant. Not a surprise. That's basically made up of Ruby's and the old On the Rocks space. So those are, we only have maybe 5 buildings in that area that go into that square footage calculation. Those two are 2 big footprints that are sitting vacant right now. Fisherman's Wharf is 100% occupied. And then, as I said, if you kind of aggregate all of that across the waterfront itself, we're running about a 39% vacancy rate, or 66,000 square feet of space. And then, just for your benefit, your next meeting is on March 8th, as I mentioned. We'll have this waterfront amenities RFP back on your agenda for that meeting. And tentatively, I'm waiting to get it from planning. You are likely going to have either at your March 8th meeting or your April meeting, we're trying to get it on for March 8th, is a conditional use permit for the Redondo Landing. The 2 basement spaces in the Redondo Landing, where the old Brixton place was and where the Boogie used to be, those 2 basement spaces, there's been a request to do a master conditional use permit for those 2 spaces. One of those spaces has a current conditional use permit, the other one doesn't. So we'll bring that hopefully back to you in March. Planning department's working on that right now. So it's kind of on their timeline if they can get that whipped into shape to get that back to you. So that'll be something for your consideration.
That's exciting.
Meeting. Yeah, it is. And really it's really being driven by the notion that we're trying to get those spaces have been vacant for a long time. There is some, strangely enough, which I find interesting in the middle of the pandemic, there's some interest in those spaces. But in order to really make them attractive to a tenant, they kind of want to understand what the operating conditions are going to be for those spaces. And so that's why we need to come back and talk to you about a conditional use permit that would apply to both of those basement spaces. So hopefully that'll be.
Rotating mermaid?
Yes, sir.
Can I get the rotating mermaid light?
You got to talk to Bob Resnick about that one. So that's really my report, trying to keep it short and brief, but happy to take any questions you might have.
So I have a question. What's going on with the skateboard park or the skateboard amenity?
Yes. So the last I heard on that was that the Public Works Department was trying to figure out if they could do a design build concept contract. They kind of feel like, given the specialized nature of the skate park, that it's not going to lend itself well to having a design and then taking that design out to a contracting process and trying to find somebody who's going to come in and implement it. They'd like to do that as a combined design build contract. And they were having some conversations with the city of Anaheim, who I guess has been very successful in putting in a couple of skate parks using that design build concept. I think they've gotten comfortable that they can use that vehicle. They're having a couple of conversations with the city attorney's office in terms of contracting process. But if they can get that put together, then they would have that out for a contracting process, I think, sometime soon. We still need to think through how that ultimately, what the design component means, because I know you've had some input. I think city council's had some input. So, where do you get to see the design piece if we're doing a design build contract? So, but I know they're trying to work through some of those mechanics, and I'm not sure they've made it all the way through how they're going to put that process into place yet.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else for Director Proud report? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Carlson had his hand up.
Same question as, sorry, thank you. Same question as last month. Any update on schedule of events or, any changes or new plans, or is it still just take COVID day by day?
Yeah, we're still taking COVID day by day. I think I may have mentioned last month, we aren't anticipating doing any events at least until June 1st. I think the first thing that we have on the Pier Association calendar is they're trying to remain optimistic that maybe we can do movie nights in June. And if we can't do it as a kind of a gathered situation like we've done maybe down on pad 10, one alternative might be able to do a drive-in movie, maybe up on a different location where we do a setup screen and try to do it that way. Won't drive as much foot traffic to the businesses, but at least would give some activity. Maybe they can do car service. I think you mentioned that last month. There may be some ways to get creative about how we handle that. But for the moment, we're kind of thinking June is our target, and we'll just play it day by day and see how we're doing.
Heroes in a movie. Sounds good to me. Thanks.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Any other questions for Director Proud before we go to referrals to staff? Okay, referrals to staff. Roger?
Nothing. Thanks.
Tom?
None for me.
Leslie?
None.
Steve? Vicky?
Only the one I think Stephen already has about the splash wall and the lighting that fell down in the storm.
Okay. Yeah, I have that.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. Matt?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to our next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen and Elizabeth, for that draft RFP. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks.
Have a
Good
good
night,
night.
everyone.
Good night.